You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 18th part of What If Deku Helps His Best Friend Peter Parker. Smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. "You're late, you idiot," Endeavor shouted. Normally, All Might's late arrival would be infuriating, especially when he appeared after NG had done the work to steal the glory like the showboating oaf he was. But frankly, right now he couldn't care less. What held his attention was the sight of his children. Fayumi's shoulder was leaking a steady stream of crimson, her clothes ruined, and her arm hung limply at her side. Beside her, Shoto's left arm had seen better days. He lessened the intensity of his flame, slowing it to a stop. Several of the medical drones gave him some supplies. He took them as quickly as he could, wiping his chin from the blow he took. Endeavor, the green-haired boy, breathed, but NG paid him no mind. He gave Shield one good look, and even as the scientist cowered, it didn't cover up most of the injuries. The man was sporting a bad wound on his side, and NG wouldn't doubt there were a good dozen or so bruises under his suit. Still, the way that he was sitting there, leaning against the wall, chances were that he would live. He wasn't losing any blood, not that NG could see, which meant that he could wait. His heavy footfalls practically sounded like pistons on the metal surface. Neither of his children looked at him with disdain or fear. They just looked tired. NG leaned down, taking note of the remains of a suit jacket around Shoto's arm, and the brace that the rest of said jacket formed around Fayumi's shoulder. Medical drones were by their side, small robotic arms applying whatever help they could as they worked in sync for their patients. "The medical drones will take care of us," Shoto said, his voice strained but firm. He winced before looking back at the older man. "Are you all right?" he asked. "It's not as bad as it looks," Fayumi said, trying to smile through the pain. "It's okay, Dad. I'm fine, really." What the hell was she doing? She wasn't the one that needed to be strong for him. That was supposed to be his job. Shoto scrolled and looked away. "I'm banged up, but I'll manage." "I'm sorry." "Why?" Shoto asked. "None of this was your fault. I still managed to get you where you didn't need to be." Shoto gave him a confused look. The boy looked strange, practically suspicious. His sister wasn't that far behind, though she hid it better. It wasn't the face that he wanted to see, but that hardly mattered. Peter felt at ease as he set himself on the stretcher the medical drones sent for him. He lied down, seeing the other drones at work around him, cutting into his suit and cleaning his wounds with alcohol and patching him up. "Thanks, Karen. Didn't know you were a doctor now," Peter joked. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted other security drones foaming up the unconscious villains and placing them in stretchers too as they wheeled off. Fat Albert needed too, and he had to hold himself back from laughing since his chest hurt. "Well, I'm only following the protocol listed in these medical robots. I am impressed to say the least in what each of these drones has. Each one is like an advanced first aid kit. Makes me fear for doctors in the future. Easy, as much as we love robots, we still need a human hand," Peter replied, breathing before he winced. "Eck, Izzy." He turned, seeing the medical drone applying more of that cream to his shoulder wound. "At the least it seems that the worst will pass, but you'll need a hospital. Thankfully, I count about 50 ambulances en route from the hospitals across the island. Seems like you found yourself a new home. Is it cozy?" Peter asked, looking up at the ceiling. "Oh yes, much more spacious than UA's servers. Just another vacation home for me. And I'll be sure to keep you up to date on any goings-on here in the future. Karen, let's not get to stealing anything vital." "Oh, I understand that. Mainly just ideas." "Hatsume is coming around." Peter turned and saw May walking with the black-haired girl hand in hand. "Phew, it's the MVPs." Peter waved with his good hand. He saw the little girl perk up and run towards him. At that height, she looked no older than 7 or 8, her features a bit biracial with some white and Asian. "Mister, are you okay?" she asked, eyes wide as May stood beside him. "Just gotta see a doctor. Took out those bad guys for ya." Peter gave her a thumbs up. "I couldn't have done it without your help though." I didn't do anything." The girl looked away. "I just hid when those villains came, and then when I saw one of them come in when you were hurt and all those loud noise." Peter put his good hand on her shoulder. The girl perked up. "Are you hurt at all?" She shook her head. "Okay, so where's your parents at?" My dad should be upstairs," she muttered, fiddling with her fingers. "So, are you, like, a hero or something?" she asked, looking back up. I mean, those villains seem dangerous but you don't, well, look like one. What? Oh, the ruined rental, Peter asked, patting his chest on the stretcher. Well, a wise man once said that if you can't be a hero without a costume, then you don't deserve one. Well, paraphrased of course, he said, smiling nostalgically as he felt the drones lift up his stretcher. We'll head over to the drone service elevator. There's enough room for the ladies present, Karen in the drone said as Peter began to be wheeled towards said elevator, the girls walking by his side. But, to answer your question, Peter sighed, looking back at the girl. Technically, I'm gonna be Spider-Man. Also I am going to school as well, UA. In fact, UA, isn't that in Japan? The girl asked, and your accent is a little New Yorker. Peter's eyebrows perked up. Queens born and raised. Where are you? Oh, man, I never got your name MVP. Peter smiled as he felt a drone dab his forehead with a wet cloth as they made their way through the server room. I'm Peter by the way, Peter Parker, and the girl there is May. Up ahead, he could see the drone service elevator. Hello, my name is Hatsume. May attempted in English, smiling awkwardly. The girl bit her lip, looking to the side before setting back on the brown-haired boy and smiled in turn. And my name is Penelope O'Neill, although friends call me Penny. Izuku was wheeled out on a stretcher, finally back on the first floor as the drones were busy organizing the people in coordination with the heroes who were present at the gala. As he lay there, he could see the villains being escorted into armored trucks and some helicopters flying overhead. He winced, looking down at his right hand as doctors were checked in on him, removing the stabilizing foam and examining his broken fingers. He looked around, seeing All Might with Melissa. The sight made Izuku's heart ache as she saw her father talking with some of the police before offering them his wrists. Melissa let out a wail before All Might had his hands on her shoulders. He saw Shoto being transferred into an ambulance with his sister, Endeavor standing with them. The number 2 hero walked into Shoto's ambulance to be with them. We're gonna take care of you. Are there any guardians we should inform about your condition? The EMT asked in English as they got processed into an ambulance. It was bigger than a normal one, more like a hospital bus of some kind. Oh, my guardian is All Might, Izuku replied in English. The paramedic cracked an eyebrow. Let's get one more on board. I'll go inform him that we're taking you to this hospital. Hey look, there's another. Bring him on, said another EMT, waving as Izuku craned his head down. He saw Peter being wheeled up with May by her side and a little girl with black hair. Parker-san. Parker was wheeled up the ramp by the drones and settled in beside Izuku. Midori. He laughed, wincing. Oh, so, rough night. That's... Izuku paused, unsure of how to respond. Ano. May paused, parsing her English before a drone wheeled up beside her and the confused paramedics. She is with Peter Parker there. No guardian present. The drone stated. Okay then, hop on miss. The EMT stepped aside, and May got on board. Hey Peter, the girl called out, and Peter sat up in his stretcher. See, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Can I be a hero, even though I don't have a quirk? She asked, and Izuku blinked, feeling a nostalgic rush inside him as he turned towards Peter who only smiled. You sure can. Just gotta be smarter than the average bear, and you can be. Peter gave her a thumbs up with his good arm, the girl beaming in joy. I can't wait to hear of the great Penny. My daddy should be inside him. She paused, and Izuku noticed a man staggering through the crowd. Daddy. The two rushed towards one another, the man getting on his knees and bringing her into a tight embrace. Peter let out a soft sigh, looking up at the ceiling as Izuku blinked. What was that all about? Izuku asked, and Peter turned. Oh, just a girl who helped me out. Nothing major. Peter groaned before resting on the stretcher. Hey, can we get a move on? Said a cranky old voice as Izuku craned his neck, seeing an old man with a mustache in the driver's seat. He could briefly see his name tag as S. Lee. I'm getting too old for this and I'm missing my show. Keep your diaper on, Stanford. Peter sighed. I'm gonna need some shut-eye. I think we all deserve it. He groaned, and Izuku turned in his stretcher. Fighting enemies with lots of different powers can take the energy out of anyone, let me tell ya. Enemies with different powers. Izuku leaned back, looking at the ceiling. Different powers. Wolfram glowed pink-orange that one time, and his muscles bulked up immensely, and he had his metal manipulation. Multiple quirks. Izuku mouthed, his heart sinking. It couldn't be, could it? Momo sipped some hot chocolate, standing beside her mother and her father as they were being interviewed by heroes and police officers by a car. She saw the last of the villains being processed into armored trucks, two noteworthy ones catching her eye. One was some kind of giant winged beast, the other some African man with a massive stomach. So you had a hand in the defense of the civilians? The officer asked. Yes, Maya asked, sitting on the edge of a van. Is someone gonna get me that steak or what? Her quirk needs iron, Shiki explained as the officer nodded. I doubt any steakhouses are open at this hour, but I know of some sandwich shops like triple steak, triple spinach, Maya suggested, looking up at him. Flatbread, with sweet onion. I'll pass it right along. Momo reached for her purse, grabbing her phone. She saw Todoroki was here, and she began to text, primarily in a group text after she put in Midoriya, both the Todoroki's and Melissa's numbers, and Peter's last. Are you guys okay? Where are you at? She sent, and looked down at her phone. Concerned for your friends, Shiki asked, and Momo looked up, seeing his warm smile. Just asking if they're okay. Momo replied, the black-haired girl looking down. All Might said he was going to handle that Midoriya child and Endeavor's son. Maya spoke out. I need to at least double-check, Momo said, biting her lip lightly before looking at the ground, phone back in her purse. I'm just glad you two are okay. Me and Yagami were huddled together when those mercs were on the second floor. Couldn't do much there. Seems like I missed all the action. Shiki mused, looking back and forth. It was better that you weren't there, Maya curtly replied, glaring at the ground. Shiki shrugged. Momo turned away, looking down at her hands as she sat, elbows on knees. She noticed some blood on her nails, and remembered. Mother, HNN, the way you fought and used your quirk like that. Momo looked to the side. My quirk made it hard to be a hero. I didn't have the aim correction your teacher Snipe has, and I don't have unique ammo. Maya shrugged. I created the gun and bullets. Nothing more, nothing less. You've been out of that job for years and the point, daughter. Honey, let her. And no, father, it's fine. Momo replied, taking a deep breath while collecting her thoughts. During the summer, can you train me? Maya raised a slender eyebrow. I want to become stronger like you. I want to be able to become strong enough in other areas so that I wouldn't have to fall back on killing or helping and killing as she saw her mother sigh. Your ideal is admirable, but don't become like some all-high and mighty pacifist that can escape from an impossible situation without ending a life. You did so before, and I don't want to do it again. Momo cut her off, jaw hard. All Might told me that it's an impossible standard, but I just don't want to. Before her mother could answer, a vibrating noise hit her ears. Momo quickly retrieved her phone out of her purse. The screen showed two messages, one from Todoroki Sayumi and one from Peter. Me and Shoto are on an ambulance to the hospital. We're fine. Thanks for asking, Yaorazu-san. I am alright. Are you okay? I am with Midoriya in an ambulance as well. Hope you are well, Momo. Momo typed rapidly. Thank goodness you're all okay. She didn't seem to mind that Peter's response was a bit formal as well. Maya and Shiki were engrossed in conversation as she saw a blue blur run out of the tower's entrance. Duh, I'm late. All Might suddenly appeared close by in a burst of speed. Must have missed Parker. I'll give it to him at the hospital. The symbol of peace mused as he pocketed the smartphone. She recognized it too, one belonging to Peter during those times in class. Those young rascals. I'll have to give them a talking to. Momo looked down at her phone, seeing the response from Peter and then back to All Might, eyebrow quirked high. It was raining hard today as the sky turned dark, and all of Tokyo seemed to be getting pounded by a summer rainstorm. Shouta could hear the rumbles of thunder from outside of his old car as he sat in his seat on the sidewalk, eyes fixed on the front door. He'd been there since 9 in the morning, and it was on the verge of 5 in the afternoon. His lunch box of snacks by his side and some water bottles down near his feet in his dingy car. It allowed him to not be noticed as he remained parked. He turned his head to the left, right beside a parking meter as he lowered the window. He grabbed a 1,000-yen coin and deposited it into the machine, giving him 2 extra hours. Where are you? He muttered to himself, eyes on the building across the street, specifically the Seinen Leap Publishers building. The clock was ticking past 5 now as Shouta focused hard on all the cars going past, the people walking along the sidewalks with umbrellas over their heads. 5:15. Shouta drank some water and applied extra eye drops, and the rain kept pouring, the thunder roaring overhead as people went about their business. 5:30 now. As cars went past, he saw it. A dingy little Kia Beetle in brown rolling past and parking in front of the Seinen Leap building from the other side. Shouta leaned forward and saw someone in a heavy coat walk out with an umbrella in one hand and a cane in the other while also carrying a briefcase. He had quite the limp and had a mop of old white hair under his hat. Araki-san, Shouta muttered, getting his keys ready as he barely saw the man in the front lobby talk with the receptionist, hand in the briefcase before he received an item. He walked out, Araki keeping his head low as he returned to his car, putting away his umbrella, cane, and briefcase before he started it up and began moving forward. Shouta started the ignition, going to the light at the end of the street and doing a U-turn at the end of a line turning left. He had the wipers on and stayed several cars behind the Beetle. The drive must have been over an hour as Shouta followed Araki's Kia through traffic, eventually exiting the Tokyo area west towards Narita. He saw Araki pull off and exit, so Shouta did as well, making sure to keep his distance at 2 cars behind his quarry as he could see him under the rain. They turned right, and Shouta followed him down the streets. Soon some cars left, but Shouta made sure to give himself distance. Before long, he saw Araki pull into a parking garage next door to an apartment complex. Shouta parked on the other side of the street and waited, inspecting the apartment. A simple building, about 10 stories tall. He got out, dressed in his casual attire. He pulled up the hood on his jacket as he jogged across the street to a nearby liquor store, getting under a awning and blowing into his hands to keep warm. One eye on the lotto numbers before him, the other on the parking garage. He saw the umbrella-toting old man exit the garage and walk along the path, briefcase in hand as he got to his building. Shouta followed, seeing the old man walk on in. Shouta entered the building, seeing a receptionist to the side as he pulled his hood off. "Sir, sorry, visiting an old friend." It wasn't a lie. I was told he lived here. "Who are you looking for?" Araki-san," Shouta explained. Old man, white hair, walks with a limp. "Oh yes, he's here. 7th floor, far end of the hall." "Bingo. Thank you." Shouta nodded and walked into the elevator. He rode it up, departing and seeing the state of the complex. Wasn't too run down, but wasn't upscale either. Just average. The black-haired man walked down the hall, eventually arriving at the door at the far end. The door looked a little worn and plain, the other doors in the hallway having various decorations to make it stand out. He looked down, seeing the light under the door. Shouta knocked 3 times and stepped back, hands in jacket pockets. He waited, and waited, and waited. He knocked again, 4 times. Nothing. "Araki-san, I know you're in there." He heard shuffling inside and he sighed. "It's me, Aizawa Shouta. I interned under you in my first year at UA, and then again my 3rd year," he said, stepping back. He sighed, not hearing any movement. This amount of paranoia was irritating. "I was in a sting operation providing support from afar using my quirk. Grizzly and Johnny Bats were the villains we helped apprehend. Maybe something else, something close. We spent that night eating paninas and drinking coffee since we had to stay up that night for a report. I ordered the steak, sweet onion and cheese. I think you settled on that BLT." He heard the clicking and clacking of many locks coming undone and Shouta let out a sigh of relief before stepping back. The door opened, and Aizawa Shouta finally saw the narrowed glance of a shorter and cross-looking man with white wiry hair, leaning against a cane. Behind him on the kitchen counter was a simple Glock handgun. It was a VLT. Araki-Hayu replied as he took a deep breath, standing up straight and groaning. "Aizawa-kun, good evening." "Good evening, Araki-san. Mind if I come in?" "Nananji." Araki grunted and stepped aside before he picked up the gun, holstering it irritably. Shouta walked in, blanching a bit at the place's smell. He could see a workbench at the far end of the living room along with numerous crinkled up paper bunches and a wastebasket. He noticed dust on the doorway as he came in, brushing his finger across it. "Ever consider hiring a cleaning service?" Shouta mused. "No, because I don't trust them." Araki growled as he limped into the kitchen and opened up a cabinet. "Want a drink?" "I drove." HNN. Araki pulled out what appeared to be some brandy and stepped over to the glass cabinet. "So, 10 years since we last talked, and you follow me here in that rusty old scrap heap." Shouta perked up. "You were always 2 cars behind. You didn't mix it up." Araki looked back, offering a smirk. Shouta sighed as he saw the old man limping over to the freezer with his glass, putting it against the fridge as ice began to fall down. "For the record, you dropped off the grid and moved out of Tokyo. I lost contact." Shouta crossed his arms as the man went back to his counter and began to pour himself some brandy. "Yeah, well, the Yakuza may be a shell of itself, but it's not gone entirely." Araki replied with a shrug. "Got into a bad dust-up 11 years back. Got trailed, had to move again." "I see. You could have talked, I would have helped. Not in your fledgling hero career. Besides, you were busy making your connections to the underground." Araki waved it off, taking a sip of his drink and smacking his lips. "Don't worry yourself sick on my account. You still could have said something." "Oh, stop being sentimental." Araki rolled his eyes. "Now, I doubt you trailed me all the way from Seinen Leap just to catch up on old times." So, he set his glass down, leaning against the counter closer to the microwave. "What do you want?" "Answers. I'm closing in on a case." "Huh? Really? I know you teach at UA. Now, couldn't ask Fukuda to give you a hand?" Araki asked, grabbing his glass and limping past Shouta towards the main living room. Despite the drawing workbench, there were some well-lived couches and a TV set. "This one is more personal to me." "Really? Well, consider me intrigued then." Araki smirked, looking back as he lifted up a blind on his window, looking out beyond Narita and to the mountains. What is it that I could help with a young pup like Eraserhead? He said, lifting his glass. What do you know of Peter Parker and his story? Araki visibly shifted, not drinking as he brought his glass down. His old gray eyes were glued to Shouta's within the dim room, the only sound being the rain and the thunder from outside. He sighed through his nose. He's in your class, isn't he? Got it in one. Great. Araki took another sip of his glass, wincing at the burn of the brandy. Of all the teachers he had to get you. You make it sound like a bad thing. Echananji. Araki set the glass to the side and sighed before narrowing his eyes at Shouta. What I say does not leave this room. Understand? He only used this tone back when they were on stings. This was big, and Shouta felt his heart skip a beat. Fine. Araki took his cane and limped past Shouta. He followed, a moment later seeing Araki's bedroom with sheets uneven and Spartan drawers. Araki walked over to a wall where a framed poster of one of his past manga covers was displayed. Psychosocial was the title, with the big words in English overhead, and the main heroine aiming her pistol at the reader. Araki took the frame down, revealing a safe. He placed his hand on the pad presented. Fingerprints seemed to be all that was needed as the safe clicked and the door opened. Glancing inside, Aizawa saw the stacked folders within. You're gonna have to take a seat in the living room. And a drink. I drove. I won't need one. The two returned to the couch in the other room, Araki grabbing his brandy as Shouta took his seat, and Araki sat across from him. He looked at the case file in his hands, then back to Shouta. The Erasure hero looked back at him with a hard gaze, jaw clenched. Start from the beginning. He set it down, and Shouta reached for the file, opening it and seeing the sketches. Araki leaned back in his seat and took a sip of his drink, and Shouta began to read. Early childhood memories, a graveyard with the notes. Richard and Mary Parker, mother and father, dead by plane crash when Parker was under a year old. Lost his parents that young. He flipped through more of the sketches, seeing a young Peter with some adults, one being a man with a warm smile, and the other a slender, attractive woman. Ben and May Parker, uncle and aunt, Peter's parental figures. In the background, he could see the Statue of Liberty as well, confirming that Parker did indeed live in New York at one point. Shouta flipped through more pages, delicately inspecting each one. Next was Peter Parker standing next to Ben and May over a birthday cake. Then Peter was looking up at a man in a suit of armor. The suit looked high quality, even futuristic like something out of a science fiction manga. A speech bubble read, "Nice work, kid." The armored man looked like a pro. The notes to the side. Iron Man, Tony Stark, Avengers founding member, The Avengers. Shouta read aloud. Some hero group in America. Keep reading. Araki droned, taking another sip of his liquor. Noticed something as well. Shouta looked down, seeing people in the background of each sketch as if Peter was in an area of sorts. Meeting this chubby kid, who went by the name of Netted apparently. He took stock of the people in the background and noticed. The people looked quirkless, Shouta said aloud. There's more to it. Shouta got back to reading, going through each paper as he heard only his breathing, the ice shifting within Araki's drink, and the thunderstorm outside, apart from placing each sheet of paper to the side anyway. Then came a peculiar image, Peter's hand being bitten by a spider. A note to the side made his eyebrows hike up. Source of powers, Oscorp designed genetically modified spider. Shouta raised an eyebrow even higher. The images looked a lot like that flashback arc in Arachnophobia, complete with the uncle dying and setting up the hero on his path to heroism. Did the old man start mixing fantasy with reality? Looking back at the prior pages, he saw the Iron Man once more, the glowing symbol on his chest. It looked just like the Tin Man insignia. Araki seemed to smirk behind his glass. Aizawa continued. A coffin being lowered, the tombstone reading Benjamin Parker. The sight of a weeping woman to the side and a mass of mourners all around. How did he die? This Uncle Ben, Shouta asked. Didn't see it. Araki replied with a shrug. Take that for what you will. And so Shouta continued on. Peter looking at a cheap imitation of the suit he now wore, made of stuff acquired at home like a hoodie and some store-bought items. Creating a tub filled with a white substance. Fighting some street-level thugs. No sign of any pro-heroes in New York, the hero capital of America. Not even the thugs Peter fought, or any of his classmates from the few sketches in school looked like they had quirks. A curious creative license, perhaps to further protect Parker's origins in some way. Meeting a middle-aged man with a small beard and mustache, sitting with him on the bed. Tony Stark once more, the closest Shouta could identify as a pro in the sketches. Another page, Peter, in a better suit, standing next to several heroes. Iron Man from before with an individual in jet black feline-esque body armor, and a black and steel-armored hero staring down an equally diverse set of opponents, including a blue-armored man with a shield, a man with a metal arm, a man who could fly, and some red-costumed giant, along with many others. They were in battle in an airport of some kind, names attached in bubbles to each one. The suit on Peter, he used it in the final exams. He uttered, Peter's experience was confirmed if this sketch was true in some form or fashion. He's fought with and against both heroes and villains before stepping foot into UA. Judging by this, a year before, maybe less than that, then came the fight with this winged villain. A man wearing some kind of winged power armor, more high-level support tech. Not just that, but on a plane, in the sky. The situation was extreme, even for most pros. Then he saw the sketches become more intense in detail. This ringed ship, it looked similar to the Hell Ring saucers used in Arachnophobia, used to transport Thanato's legions. He looked at Araki. Did the old man genuinely mix up his imagination and creative license for reality? Did you base Arachnophobia on this supposed past? The old man laughed, a wheezy, raspy thing. Think I've lost my mind, do ya? The UA teacher nodded. I might. Can't say I blame ya. Even so, keep readin'. You came all this way here. May as well finish A. He wasn't wrong, though he was beginning to fear he'd find less clear answers here than he'd thought. Peter's confrontation with the two villains, each bearing similarities to Thanato's lieutenants. Iron Hand and Dark Mind, flying out of Earth, and on the ringed UFO no less, then proceeding to save a wizard of sorts with a sentient red cape. The wizard, Shouta said aloud, another of the hero's main companions along with the Tin Man. Tony Stark, the Iron Man, looking like a king and knighting him with his arm. You're an Avenger now, said the text bubble. Next, a picture of Peter being held at gunpoint by a man with odd weapons. The next page was turned, revealing a world of ruined alien skyscrapers, satellites, and sinkholes. Then another picture came forth. This time, it was Peter hiding on some overcrop. Looking down at the wizard and walking towards him was some hulking titan of a man. And the name beside this bald man, Thanos, Shouta said aloud. Influence for Thanato's Ha. Araki nodded, and Shouta remembered Thanato's design. A massive muscular creature in a dark black robe, wielding a massive scythe, and on his left hand, a golden gauntlet riddled with various jewels. His goal, that he had completed, was the erasure of half of all life in the galaxy. This Thanos didn't have that cloak or the scythe, only pants, a skin-tight vest, and that same gauntlet. An exchange made between the wizard and Thanatos in the opening chapters before the purge began. They were eerily similar. Titan was like most planets, too many mouths, not enough to go around. And when we faced extinction, I offered a solution. A bubble, one of several, connected to Thanos said. Genocide, Strange replied. At random, dispassionate to rich and poor alike. They called me a madman. And what I predicted came to pass. Congratulations, you're a prophet. Strange remarked wryly. I'm a survivor. The speech bubbles continued. Who wants to murder trillions? Strange growled. The page ended, and Shouta turned it, seeing it again from Peter's perspective. With all 6 stones, Thanos snapped his fingers. I would simply snap my fingers, and they would all cease to exist. I call that mercy. Shouta turned the next page, and the combat that ensued. Peter slinging through ruined buildings and portals before he wound up getting grabbed, and the solemn-looking titan of a being was glaring down at him, his gauntlet at Peter's throat. Insect. The speech bubble by Thanos growled. And the fight continued until he was trapped, bound after displaying God knows how many differing abilities, until Thanos was freed, largely thanks to that gunslinger from before as he smacked Thanos in the face, releasing the Mantis woman's grip on his head. The note to the side read Quill, a fucking idiot. What came next was a meteor shower, and Peter putting people on web lines and flying through the debris as hell rained down around him. The men and woman around Peter turning to dust. Just like in the beginning parts of Arachnophobia, where all but the hero, the Tin Man, and the wizard survived. Then, Peter, holding the man that gave him his suit, as Tony Stark was crying, the despair written all over him with the bubbles it's going to be alright above him as the world dissolved around him. He turned to the next page, finding it pitch black. What is this? Death? Shouta was silent, looking at this as he saw the following page, recognizing it as he put the pure black page to the side. His eyes widened. It was the skyline of Musutafu, Tokyo in the distance, the hill with UA, just seen to the corner, and at the forefront was a very similar description of that giant villain Mount Lady fought in her debut. Aizawa leaned forward, placing the file on the coffee table before leaning back in his seat, hands to his face and taking one big sigh before staring at the older man as his hands fell to his lap. Quite a story. I like it, he chuckled in reply. Shouter remained stone-faced. How much of it is real? Every bit of it, Araki said, without a flinch of doubt. Shouter frowned, lips pursing. You do realize how unbelievable this is, right? Afraid you've wasted your time, Aizawa-kun. The old man laughed, strained and wheezing. Every bit of it is real. He frowned, looking at the sheets. He died on that alien world, to a cosmic maniac. Then he came here. Where he comes from isn't here, but it is. In a sense, you're talking about parallel dimensions, multiverse theory, fantasy and science fiction. The old man shrugged. I can't change what I see in their minds with my quirk. You know that. You don't have to believe it. Just like you don't have to go about looking for this kid's past like it's any of your business, but here we are. Aizawa took a deep breath and let it out with a sigh. So, according to you, he's from a world where there's no hero society, but they have these Avengers. They were basically the only heroes around. So how did he wind up under Mount Lady's care? She volunteered. She eavesdropped at some point and stepped up. Araki replied. Came after All Might handled that sludge villain if I remember correctly. But he doesn't exist here according to this. How did she even apply for guardianship? Fukuda probably called in favors. Got some documents forged. The black-haired man nodded. Believable, considering Fukuda knew people in the underground. People Shouta had set him up with. So, now you know, Araki said, brandy in hand. What are you going to do now? I'm not even sure if this isn't just you having finally cracked somehow. He admitted bluntly. Araki chuckled. It'll hit you eventually, I think. I just tried to move on as normally as I could. I was bursting with ideas and inspiration at first, happy to finally get started on a new series for my publisher. But after, while drawing this and storyboarding, he leaned back and looked up at the ceiling before he sighed deeply. I realized how small we were in the universe, and how, possibly, there may be a Thanos out there right now. I wonder if it's only a matter of time before he finds Earth with its pants down. Or if he's finding those stones and then he snapped his fingers. Curtains for half of humanity within minutes. Shouta said nothing. He could see why the thoughts were so frightening. If you believe them, that is. And he got the feeling Araki did believe them. He stood up, hands stuffed in his pockets. Is there any place to eat close by? Hitting the road, Araki asked wryly. And so soon too. Aizawa didn't answer, simply staring at the man. Araki nodded. H&M. There's this nice fried chicken shop down the block. Want to go down there together? Don't you usually hole yourself up here? Shouta asked, and he noticed the briefcase by the workbench once more. So, was your manuscript in there? It was. Now it's loaded with cash. Araki got up, grabbing his cane and limping over. Kneeling down and opening the case revealed many stacks of yen banknotes. He took a big wad and placed it in his pocket. Come on, my treat. And besides, he smirked, I have the great Eraserhead by my side. I think I can afford to drop my guard for a spell. Shouta got up, seeing him close it. So, why don't you just do direct deposit? I don't trust much in electronic stuff. I'd rather keep my money. He got to the doorway after Araki limped out, seeing the file from his vantage point on the coffee table one last time. He had quite a bit to consider. The door to the bar opened before Tamura perked up from his seat at the counter. Kurogiri was busy cleaning a glass as his golden eyes shifted in his direction. Yo, Shigaraki. Jiren waved lazily, smirking with his traditional cigarette in his mouth. Sorry to pop in unannounced. Do you have my new party members? Tamura put his phone down, tone eager. Alright boys. And lady, come on in. Jiren stepped aside, and the first one in was a massive man in a deep brown hooded cloak, a red mask with beady black eyes covering his face. Tamura could feel his eyes on him. After him was someone incredibly skinny, bound up in a black straitjacket with red dotted belts. Even his eyes were covered, his mouth held open by hooks which caused even Tamura to wince at the sight. He seemed to wheeze and breathe harshly. Next came a shorter individual wearing a school uniform and a gas mask of sorts. Hey, I don't want no brats here. Tamura pointed at Jiren. He felt the gas mask wearing boy prickle up. I'm 19, asshole, he replied, his voice altered thanks to his mask. The teal-haired youth paused and then let out a laugh. What did you do? Not drink your milk or something? Tamura, Kurogiri spoke out sharply. TCH. Tamura shrugged. Sorry. He paused, looking at the guy's mask. What's with that mask of yours anyway? It looks like something out of a video game. Oh, we doing show and tell, said an accented female voice behind Tamura. The boy turned around, seeing a girl with wild-dyed blue hair with black tips. She had piercings around her nose and ears, wearing a simple pink sweatsuit and sneakers, and her hands positioned behind her back. Her wild-looking eyes were also amethyst in color. The fuck did you come from? Tamura asked, leaning back in surprise. Yo Shan-san. Jiren stepped aside, and a man stalked in wearing rather revealing clothing. He had a simple mat of dark brown hair and smooth ruby red eyes. His clothing consisted of a pair of black leather skinny jeans, a vest with one button that showed off abs galore within that lean gymnast-like frame of his, and an amethyst feather boa around his neck. Easy on the leader here. Seems like he's not the kind of cat to handle surprises. He oiled, Tamura narrowing his eyes. Hey, Jiren. So who are these guys? Tamura growled. You said you wanted some bona fide killers to join your group, right? Well, meet the most bloodthirsty pitbulls I know on this side of Japan. Jiren nodded, looking at Kurogiri. I'll be expecting my finder's fee again. The Black Mist man bent down under the counter of the bar and pulled out another briefcase. Tamura saw cloak, straitjacket, and gas mask sit at varying booths. Straitjacket again breathing as his teeth moved, slightly as if they had minds of their own. Shit, that was disturbing. Creepy as hell too. Okay. Tamura turned around in his seat as Jiren approached the briefcase with a pep in his step. So, you guys want to join the League of Villains, right? Oh, we starting this little kumbaya? Cloak asked, his voice deep as he looked about. Work hard. Need to work. Straitjacket uttered. Why don't you start, leader-san? Gas Mask said as the dumbass seemed to saunter on past, taking his seat in a booth. Shan noticed, and Tamura saw it. A flicker of light, and she was by his side, sitting beside him humming happily. Your quirk is teleportation? Tamura asked the girl. How? Shan raised a hand. My quirk Blink. So my name here is Blink. But real born name is Shanmei. But call me Blink. That easy for you, no. Well, at least now I know your little alias. So you call me Blink and no mean names. Me no like meanies who call mean names. If you don't piss me off. How? Shan, or Blink, vanished again, reappearing beside the creep who seemed to be smiling a bit too much seeing this exchange. Tamura narrowed his eyes before holding out his empty glass. Kurogiri, tequila, he said, and he saw the man get to work behind the bar. Now what's your name and your quirk? You fought. Tamura felt something wet pour down onto his hand and sleeve, making him pull away. He turned, staring at Kurogiri as he whipped his hand through the air. God, the fuck was that? That wasn't me, Tamura. Kurogiri stepped back, hands reaching for a nearby towel. My arm moved on its own, only for his hand to slip and the towel to fumble onto the floor as his hands refused to close. He heard Blink giggle up a storm, with Cloak and Gas Mask snickering as Tamura turned back around. Creep had his hand, with his ring finger pointing down, outstretched. Motherfucker, he hissed, his hand on the glass as he reduced it to silicon dust. What? I was only looking to help, Shi-chan. Creep leered. Tamura contemplated leaping at him, but he felt both of Kurogiri's eyes on him, and his gaze was on the television set off to the side. Tamura growled. TCH, funny guy aren't you? I try my best to put on a smile. Ah yes, you wanted to know my little nickname. Well, you can call me Geppetto. Tamura spoke off of his tongue. Did I hear that name before? It's from the Pinocchio fairy tale. Didn't you read or watch that stuff as a kid? Gas Mask asked. With a face like that, doubt he was much of a kid. Cloak chimed in. Oh, by the way, he raised a hand. You can call me Muscular. His tone was like that of a grinning hyena. Heard of me? Muscular, I know of you. You're that infamous serial killer up in northern Honshu. You have a muscle augmentation quirk, right? Tamura said, his tone excited as he did his best to ignore Geppetto and blink off to the side. My reputation precedes me. Muscular seemed to beam, relaxing in his booth. Heard you were looking for some killers to help you in your goals. Well, count me in. Tamura seemed to grin behind his mask. Muscular was a simple guy. He wanted to kill. He could relate to that. Sounds fine to me. I know the targets too. Yeah. Straitjacket jerked up. Targets, fresh meat. Will I work hella hard? He groaned, panting as Tamura pointed. Who's he? That is Moonfish, Jiren said, who hadn't left and was loving the sight before him, going by his shit-eating smirk and crossed arms. He was scheduled for death row before he busted himself out. He got one other inmate out, someone who works under me now, and that brought Moonfish to me. No shit, Tamura asked. Moonfish? Hey, Kurogiri, do you know of this guy? Hey, and no work, and no meat, Moonfish seemed to utter, sounding almost heartbroken with his jagged teeth on display. He was much like Muscular before Muscular, a serial killer who targeted indiscriminately. Not to mention a cannibal, it made cutting into his targets easier with his quirk. Blade Tooth, Kurogiri explained. Cannibal. Hey Pet-chan. Blink spoke, looking at Geppetto. What's a cannibal? A people eater? Blinky Geppetto oiled. Wow. Mask Kid, what's your story? And your quirk got something to do with that mask. I'm a bit new in Jiren's ring, but I wanna prove myself and get back at those damn heroes. Fuck it, rest of society in general. Masked Kid spoke, voice low. I wanted to be a hero before, but my quirk made it impossible. My quirk is gas, by the way. I can conjure and manipulate poison gas. Problem is, he tapped on his mask. I'm not immune to it, so I have to wear this when I'm working. Tamura was silent and felt a little nostalgic hearing that before he brushed it aside. Surely you have a pretty face under there, Mu-chan. Geppetto spoke. Come on, you're among friends now. It's Mustard Yametrosk's fiend. Mustard replied. Oh, Geppetto put a hand to his chest. I am Suo hurt, he drawled. So I get that you're new along with Blink. Tamura pointed at Mustard. And these two are vets. Then at Muscular, who waved lazily as he sat close to a groaning moonfish. What's your deal? Why, excursions are not nearly as exciting, boo what? Geppetto seemed to smirk darkly and raised his hand at Mustard. The boy seemed to freeze on the spot. His fingers began to move. With them, so did the boy. I've done my fair share of assassinations, hits, and other killings. As his fingers began to move, Mustard seemed to be doing jumping jacks. Just because I wanted to see what would happen. When I used my puppet strings, Geppetto looked back at Tamura, red looking into ruby red. Like what? Oh, I dunno, he oiled, before Geppetto had a dangerous looking smirk, trailing a couple whose marriage was failing, and having one of them strangle the other in a fit of passionate rage. What about a person jogging on a path only for a simple twitch? His fingers relaxed, as did Mustard, who panted, free of his control. Then the thumb moved, and Mustard's leg was pulled out under him, making him fall with a yelp. I can make them tear a ligament, fall down a cliff, Geppetto whispered, leaning forward as all fingers were primed in. Mustard almost seemed to levitate up, unable to move, but Tamura could hear his panicked grunts under that mask. Or if they're going for a swim and I just relax my hands in their general direction and they drown themselves. He was licking his lips almost sensually. He's dangerous. So many possibilities. Like that time I saved a child against his bully from across a schoolyard. By taking his arms, Mustard's hands reached for his helmet as Geppetto levitated him back to the ground. Hey, wait, hold on Geppetto, and breaking his own neck. And Mustard lifted up his gas mask, showing a plain-looking Japanese teenager underneath who was panicking. Mustard blinked before he pulled his arms down, with it his mask as Geppetto had placed his hands on his lap. Fucking asshole. Geppetto shrugged. Out of the corner of the teal-haired youth's eyes, he saw Kurogiri perk up. Tamura narrowed his eyes. Shigaraki, Kurogiri spoke out, and all the occupants in the room turned towards the Black Mist Man. I am going on an errand. The master is calling to me, he said, and his suit fell down from his black misty body. Oh boy, Geppetto cooed, then he frowned when he didn't see anything. Darn, fine, be quick about it. Tamura waved his hands. He also is making sure you get along with your new league members. He won't accept you turning these back once more, Kurogiri replied, and Tamura perked up before sulking. Fine, Jiren, thank you again for your assistance. Kurogiri, now a mass of black mist, almost seemed to bow. Just doing my job. Jiren nodded, grinning back. Well, if that's all, I'll be taking off. You got accommodations for my guys here. We have proper room and board upstairs. I trust we will share it accordingly, Kurogiri asked, addressing the room, his golden eyes narrowing across. Properly too. Tamura nodded. Fine. Kurogiri nodded and he turned himself into a vortex, vanishing as Jiren waved before shutting the door behind him. Everything still hurt. Why was it that you could be treated with the best medical supplies in the world, but when you wake up after a big fight, you feel sore all over? Peter had been asking that question for about an hour after the medical drones left him. Not the deepest thought that he had in his mind, but it sure as hell wasn't leaving him right now. On the plus side, unlike the last major party he ran away from, he didn't fall out of a plane, so it was a step in the right direction when it came to heroics. You feeling okay? Karen's voice asked from his phone. No, Peter admitted. He tried to chuckle, but it came out rather choppy in his current state. At that moment, there was no doubt that Karen had a few video cameras and scanners pointed at him to make sure that he was alright. She had the entire hospital on watch, and no one was the wiser as she made herself at home there. Again, he was fine, no plain defenestration, so again, plus. All he really needed was a good night's sleep. Peter, you have a phone call. He groaned. Who is it from? You. All tiredness left him immediately. Say that I'm not available. I'm at the hotel right now and already answered. Traitor. Peter snapped the phone up from the side table and put it up to his ear as he laid back in the hospital bed, groaning a bit. Hello? Peter, are you alright? Are you okay? Do I need to do anything? He was frantic as Peter winced, pulling the phone away from his ear. Across from him, he saw that Midoriya was asleep from painkillers thanks to his broken right hand. Todoroki and his sister were in another ward if he remembered correctly. No, I'm fine, I swear. How are you? He winced, of all the times for his mouth to betray him. Oh, I'm great. Just got finished with a lovely little stakeout with Shinji. Was on top of the world when I took out a guy that was trying to get away with a hit and run. You started, her voice sickeningly sweet. But then I turn on the news and see what happened on Island, and let me tell you, that was a whole different kind of thrill. She let out a sigh of relief. You were there at the tower, weren't you? Peter paused, sighing. Yeah, came in late. Where are you now? Karen said you were in bed when I called her. What kind of bed? Yeah, I'm at the hospital. It must be late down there. You replied softly. We'll talk when you get back here. When are you flying back anyway? Tomorrow morning or so. All Might said that he's gonna book us all a flight back to Narita. Recovery girl will be there too, so we'll be as good as new the next day. Okay, I'll clear my schedule so I can pick you up then. Sleep well, okay? And for real, count sheep. Sleep is good for you. Peter took a deep breath and sighed. Thanks you. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night. Good night, Peter. Shouta walked through the streets of Japan, hoodie up to protect himself from the rain after he dropped off the old man back at his apartment. It helped him think. Plus he can walk off the chicken dinner he had with Araki. One would presume that an introvert like him wouldn't like the hustle and bustle, the movement of people around him helping to focus his thoughts, but he did. He could drown it out. Background noise, static. It helped him set aside his own unnecessary thoughts alongside the inconsequential movement around him. Alternate worlds with no heroes, Avengers, Infinity Stones, Thanos. It was all too much to process as a whole really. Part of him wanted to simply chalk it up to Araki having finally lost his mind. Another part argued that the story, or at least a very small part of it, could be proven relatively quickly. Parker's quirk. If his own quirk didn't work on him, that would certainly give credence to the allegation. There were of course quirks that he couldn't disable, but Parker didn't show the outward signs of such. In theory, his quirk should be affected the same as Midoriya's or Bakugo's. If it wasn't, well, that was a point in his favor. He could confront him directly, or his guardian. Both were apparently aware of the story and he could glean some information from their reactions in general. There was a buzzing in his pocket. A text. The dark-haired man pulled it out and read. Island attacked. Our students who were in attendance were involved. In hospital and healing. Taking Parker and Midoriya with me on a private plane home. Recovery girl will come by. All Might. Aizawa stared at the phone. Blinked once, twice, considered chucking it into the nearest garbage bin before closing his eyes, counting back from 10 and stuffing it in his pocket. Fucking ridiculous. Always with those two. He walked further into the city, trying for a while to refocus his thoughts as he tried to drown out the considerations of Island and everything that had happened there. He'd get answers on that disaster tomorrow when the news broke and there was a clearer picture. For now, he had to consider the story. Araki hadn't given any outward signs of insanity. He'd been clear-eyed, coherent, and held conversations easily. He hadn't repeated himself. The man seemed competent in every sense of the word. If the story was true, and he was by no means convinced, it added a whole new layer of potential danger around Parker. And this supposed new world or dimension. Could others follow him? Would other victims from this snap wind up in this world somehow? Why had he been the only one? Were there potential side effects to those around him? Radiation, immune system pathogens hiding within him, lack of immunities in his own system. Where exactly had he appeared in their world, and did that place have a particular quality or reason for this happening? Shouta looked up into the rainy night sky, feeling the rain on his face. More frightening, was there a Thanos in this universe somewhere? Could another snap occur here? The thoughts gave him a headache. And while the implication was frightening, it was too distant to bring about true fear. Too abstract still. Half a universe worth of people was a statistic. He could deal with statistics. He kept walking for a time, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, the white noise of the city and the rain buzzing at the back of his thoughts. He had a headache by the time he made it back to his car. He shut the door and sat there for a time before he slowly made his way home. Araki sounded so damn sure that what he had seen in Parker's head was real. Peter's backstory still had holes, and he was supposed to use this to fill them in. He got more questions than answers on this trip. But it wasn't nothing. Shouta sighed heavily and focused on the road as he navigated himself back to Coruscant Ward using his phone map. That should take his mind off of this extra-dimensional quandary for the night. That and a glass of whiskey in his liquor cabinet. The sun's rays poured in from beyond the curtains as Melissa lay in her bed. She wasn't under the covers, she was still in her dress as she looked around. She was exhausted, in pain, but she hadn't slept at all the previous night, her mind still running fast. Her room was empty and cold. She kept closing her eyes, hoping for it to have all been a bad dream, but the bloodstains at the hem of her dress kept reminding her that it wasn't. She heard Uncle Mite's voice through the walls, talking to someone on the phone. Too distant to make out, but still here with her. She peeled herself out of the bed, hearing Uncle Mite's thudding footsteps downstairs, and forced herself to leave the mattress towards the bathroom. Dredging up the energy to wash and change, she at least attempted to look even mildly put together again. The shower ran hot, almost scalding, and it was enough to push away the weariness at least for a time before she finally pulled herself out of her room with a fresh change of clothes, the bloodstained dress still in the bathroom. She wasn't sure if she should throw it out, burn it, or keep it for evidence. She walked down the hall of the luxury penthouse that was her home, descending the stairs and moving towards the kitchen. There, standing before her, was All Might, dressed in a white shirt, dark cargo pants, and a big blue apron across his titanic body. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, a small, subdued smile on his face that kinda said everything that needed to be said. "Good morning, my girl." She wasn't sure what was so good about it. But that wasn't his fault. "Hey, Uncle Mite," she said softly. All Might set the tongs down and wiped his hands as he walked to the side and opened the window a tad, turning down the heat on the skillet. He turned and walked closer to her, one giant paw resting over her shoulder. "Are you doing okay?" Melissa was silent, looking down before staring at the ground. She slumped, sitting on the seat. "What time did you get home last night?" she asked. She must have fallen asleep at least a little bit then. She didn't remember hearing him arrive. Or maybe she'd just been too lost in her own head. "Late. I came after young Midoriya and the others were on their way to the hospital. I still had business to do afterwards as well." "Are they okay?" Melissa looked up. "Izuku, Shoto, and the others. They'll be all right." All Might's smile seemed to widen a little. "They'll be heading back to Japan soon. Light injuries. For the most part." The girl felt a little relief. "I see." Melissa looked to the side, seeing a photo of her and her father on the mantle, and some of her when she was young, when Mom was alive. "All Might?" she asked, sitting at the dinner table chair. "You spoke to Dad last night, right?" Did he say why he did what he did?" All Might looked down at her, the customary smile nowhere to be seen as he frowned solemnly. "I mean, how could he?" Melissa's hands went to her face, and she began to let out sobs. She felt a big paw on her shoulder before being drawn into a gentle embrace. "I know, Melissa. I've been up all night pondering that myself," All Might whispered as his strong arms sought to comfort her. He cared too much for science and progress. He cared so much for his own goal that he forgot what mattered most. She looked up, eyes red with tears. Why would he throw everything away like this? For what? All Might released his hug on her, his dark blue eyes like stars in a dark void. She saw them move, as if she was seeing the gears in his head struggle to translate what he wanted to say. All Might let out a sigh, a long sigh, as if he didn't look like the world's greatest hero, but someone who looked tired. "There's something I need to show you," he said, and there was a gravity to his voice and look she'd never seen before. It set her on edge. "Your father knew. I think it might help make things clear." "What?" she asked. All Might shook his head. "Soon. For now, you need to eat. And I need to finalize the legalities." "Legalities?" He nodded, as if he looked at his wristwatch. 17 minutes from now, once it's notarized and mailed, I will be your legal guardian. You'll be coming with me to Japan. Until we can settle your father's trial, then we can sort out your living situation." The words seemed to choke her uncle, and they felt like a sledgehammer to the gut on her end if she was being honest. She sniffed, wiping her eyes. "Yeah, I understand. I'll tell you everything soon." She nodded, too tired to argue, and even if she weren't, it was Uncle Might. If he said he'd tell her, he'd tell her. Oh, she had to wonder what he would tell her that needed this much secrecy. Uncle Might hated secrets. "All right, we have to keep your strength up," he said, patting her shoulder. "Let's get some breakfast in you." The trip to the plane was a less than enjoyable affair. Young Midoriya was slightly surprised to hear that Melissa was on board, but that was hardly something that he needed to account for. A ton of space was available, most of it going to waste in the private jet, so everyone would be able to keep to themselves if they needed it. 4 hours into the trip, Toshinori might have thought that wasn't for the best. Young Midoriya had also given him the heads up that young Parker was safe and sound with his companion aboard the private jet of the Yaoyorozus, which put a small load off Yaga's shoulders. Still, how on earth was this going to work? He was barely present at his house, much less the minimum required to help someone through a tough time. Yet Melissa was just supposed to tough it out when Toshinori, inevitably, went over his time limit again. He could barely teach a class, much less hold out for long enough to have an hour to spare to make sure she was doing alright. And this was with him having under 3 hours available. Hell, his limit was reaching around 2 hours and 40 minutes now. He pushed it a lot the night of the attack around the end. What with the interviews and handling the villain's situation in the aftermath, was he just supposed to let her deal with it? Everyone in the country was depending on him to be the #1 hero. That duty was more important than one girl. He could do enough, he could make things work well enough, he'd gone through tougher fights. Only, she hadn't. All her life she'd been yearning to surpass her father, to become a great inventor and scientist, to create the best support gear to aid heroes in their goal for a stable, safe, and just society. She had it all planned out too. Now, she was alone. Well, Toshinori was an orphan too once upon a time. All it took was a hand reaching out to him. He couldn't give her one for all, but he could do something. Pushing off his seat, he moved with more purpose than he probably should be feeling. 1,000 different conflicting worrying thoughts clashed in his mind as he walked to the door of Melissa's room. If Night Eye were here, he would have spouted a dozen different reasons for why this was a bad idea. Toshinori only needed one good reason to go through with it. 2 knocks on the door, and a shift in the light behind it was all the warning he got. "Uncle Might," Melissa spoke. "Yes, it's me," Toshinori said. "Are you doing okay?" "As well as I can," she said through the door. "So not well at all. You remember that I said there was something I needed to tell you." If you're up for it, my girl, I can do so now," Toshinori said. God, he hoped this helped. Midoriya looked back from his seat, curious, intrigued, and a little surprised. The door to the cabin creaked for a single moment before slowly sliding open. Melissa walked out, looking up at him, intrigued despite her weariness. "There's something you need to know, my girl. I believe it may have contributed to your father's actions last night." Now the weariness vanished, replaced by an earnest yearning to come across anything in the way of answers. In the corner of his eye, Toshinori could see Midoriya listening intently. The dots of what's happening are starting to add up for him, with his eyes widening. He stopped, hesitating for a moment. Then, he let go. The steam left his body, as if his body was little more than a balloon that was trying to stay filled. He waited for it to clear and saw her squinting through the smoke. Melissa stared, eyes wide and jaw on the floor while Midoriya was muttering up a storm behind them. And Toshinori, well, he was back to looking more like the half-baked parody of what the world saw as the #1 hero. Melissa looked him up and down, mind whirling with the possibilities. Melissa reached forward, finger gently touching the skinny frame that stood before her in oversized clothes. She flinched when her finger touched solid mass, letting everything sink in further and further. "You Uncle Might," Melissa stammered. What happened?" "I was injured," Toshinori answered, his voice softer and a far cry from the bombastic tone he normally portrayed, years ago now in a deadly fight. "I kept it secret, but I've been slowly losing my power ever since, dear girl. This," he looked down to the floor before shrugging, "is the real me, I suppose." Her hand reached up, tears lining her eyes as her fingers cupped his cheek, disbelief rapidly being replaced by understanding. "Dad found out. That's why he wanted the quirk amplifier." He nodded. "I believe he wanted it before he learned of this, but when he learned of it his decision was cemented." The tears still glimmered in her eyes but didn't fall. After a moment of quiet, Toshinori shifted and turned his eyes towards Midoriya. "My quirk is called One for All." He nodded towards the young man. "An aspect of it is that it can be passed on." She blinked. "Passed on?" She turned, rounding on the stiff-looking Midoriya who sat there like a deer in the headlights. "He gave it to you." It wasn't a question, more an affirmation. Izuku blushed, looking down to his feet. "You figured that out quick. I thought Uncle Might was helping you because you had similar quirks already. So when he said it you were kinda suspect one." She answered with as much of a smile as she could muster. "He is my chosen successor." Toshinori nodded. Looking to the boy he smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry for not consulting with you young Midoriya, but she will be living with me." "And Nano." The teenager held up his hands placatingly. "It's okay I kinda figured she would know eventually after you told me she'd be living with you." Melissa turned her head from him to young Midoriya, her sharp mind working quickly. "I've never heard of a quirk that can be passed on." Then, her eyes widened, turning back towards Toshinori. "But, wait, if he has your power how can you?" "Some remnants still remain within me. For now," he answered, predicting her question. "But even before I met young Midoriya and chose him, my power was indeed draining. It's faster now, but back then I could only hold my heroic form for 4 hours at most. And now, a little less than 3, he admitted. Her eyes became grief-stricken before being filled with something he should perhaps get used to seeing. "Pity, oh Uncle Might." He reached forward, his hand grasping one of hers. "I know this is a lot to take in, dear girl, but please understand, more than anything else, this must remain a secret. Until young Midoriya is able to master one for all and take my place, the world must believe and trust in the symbol of peace. They need their number one hero. She looked at him, something searching, halting. She nodded. I understand. He nodded. Thank you, my girl. If you're feeling up to it or if you have questions, ask them. You're as much a part of this now as either of us. Peter sat down on the seat, arm in a sling as he reached ahead with his good one. He winced a bit, but the meds were doing their job in numbing some of the pain. He took his knight and moved it to the left, looking at his opponent to make her move. Momo responded by moving her pawn. Someone hasn't played a lot of chess here, have they? Karen spoke lightly in his ear, and Peter rolled his eyes. By the way, Momo, he said as he moved a pawn ahead. Thanks for taking me in May. It's fine, Peter. We are both heading for Narita, so it makes sense. Either way, you're going to reunite with your guardian, right? Should be. I texted her when I was taking off. We'll be landing in what, 8 to 9 hours? Peter mused. 7, cut in a voice, and Peter leaned his head up, seeing Mrs. Yaoyorozu walk into their cabin. Peter perked up and smiled. Hiya, Mrs. Yaoyorozu. Thanks for the last-minute save. Peter waved. The stoic auburn-haired woman didn't seem to so much as react. We had the room, she replied in fine English. Chess? Why yes, mother, Momo said, her mood tightening up. I thought that we should try and take our minds off things. Mrs. Yaoyorozu blinked, and Peter felt a chill in his spine as he saw her smirk a little. Is that so? Her tone shifted, her looking piqued and interested. How is he? I'm new, Peter said. I see, well. She reached down, patting Momo on the head as the black-haired beauty seemed to stiffen at the contact, eyes wide in surprise. You too. Have fun, show him a thing or two, would you? Mrs. Yaoyorozu commented as she turned around, stopping to gaze at the empty lounge chair. I see your friend is not present. Bathroom? Yeah. Mrs. Yaoyorozu closed her eyes for a spell before focusing her hard obsidian pearl-like eyes onto the duo. If you wish to watch TV, remotes should be under your seats. The TV units are above you. Or continue to play. You can read a lot of people in a game of chess once they are of a certain level. She looked on at Peter. Do whichever you like. The stewardess will come along with menus too, so eat up. It will be a long flight home. Momo turned back. Mother. The woman stopped and turned her attention on her daughter. So, why were you back here? Mrs. Yaoyorozu had a flat expression on her face. It's my plane, she replied, and Momo puffed her cheeks out and looked away, looking bashful as the woman left to go into her cabin. I think your mom just wanted to see how we were doing. My mother is unique, she said, looking to the side, then back to the board as she moved her queen out into the field. She looks a bit stiff, but she looked interested when she noticed you were playing chess, Peter said as he moved another pawn. The door to the bathroom opened, bringing Peter's eyes over his shoulder to see May stepping out. She looked tired, not a normal thing for the usually hyperactive Pinkette. You okay? She turned her eyes to him and did her best to smile. What you doing? She asked, stepping forward, and Peter noted the lack of answer. Playing chess, Momo answered. Never got into it. She answered, people think too slow. Momo paused, turning and looking at the girl with a raised eyebrow as May made her way across the cabin to plop down on a lounge chair. How many hours till we land? She asked. Not until later tonight. If you wish to watch some TV, you can use the remote under the chair. May perked up at Momo's query, reaching down and rummaging around a bit. Momo moved another pawn out before looking at Peter. Not for nothing, Parker, but how are you feeling? You look. She paused, and Peter got the distinct impression she was trying to find a polite way of saying you look like hell, but was having trouble. Peter smiled sardonically and looked at his cast. You know, just for future reference, don't trust the first person who claims they're a fan of yours. The black-haired beauty cocked an eyebrow before shaking her head, deciding it was best not to ask before proceeding to move her knight onto the field. They played quietly for a moment before she spoke again. There's something I wish to ask. Sure thing. Did you text me by chance last night? She asked. Oh shoot. Karen spoke in his earpiece, and Peter sucked in his lips, feeling a pit in his stomach. Why do you ask? I mean, we texted before the party end. After All Might and Endeavor stopped the villain boss and ended the incident. Momo said softly, it's been bugging me since I got a text from you but All Might had your phone. She brought out her phone, holding it up and showing the text message chain to him. So, do you have like 2 phones or something? She asked. I've only ever seen you use one and all. This one's my fault. I just wanted to reassure her and texted her back. Karen said. Peter slumped in his seat and took a deep breath. Peter swallowed, wondering how he might handle this before doing the mental equivalent of a shrug. Secret was kinda out with Izuku, Melissa and the Todorokis knowing. What was one more? Okay, he said, remembering his conversation with his friend from over a month ago. Remember back in the train station? You know, before the internships when I said that I had a foreign guidance counselor named Karen. Momo nodded. Well, that's both true and not so much. You see, the door to the cabin slid open, admitting a stewardess with a small cart. Hello sir and madams, would you like anything to drink or eat? Peter grimaced, remembering that, at the moment it was indeed kinda more than just him and Momo on this plane, and planes didn't exactly have thick walls. He offered the stewardess a smile as she approached and looked to Momo. I'll explain later. Okay. He hoped she didn't press since it'd be awkward as hell to try and say no when she was giving him a free ride home on her plane for apparently no real discernible reason as well. Luckily, she didn't. She looked curious and was eyeing him more than a little strangely, but she nodded. Of course, miss, would you like something? His eyes were drawn to May, who was sitting across from his side of the cabin, distracted and quiet. May, he called. The girl jumped where she sat, seemingly coming back into her own skin before realizing what was happening. Her target eyes quickly whirring in their sockets as she zoomed in and focused on each of their faces. Huh? Oh, ew. Just water thanks. Peter frowned, his worry for the girl increasing just a bit. Later that night, Yu paced about in the front terminal of Narita Airport, arms crossed as she looked up at the clock on the big holographic screen showing the arrival and departure times of various flights. It was well past 10 in the evening. Her phone buzzed and she reached her hand in her coat, pulling it out as she could hear a sudden summer rain start to come down outside. Look alive, here we come. It was from Karen as Yu looked up, seeing a group walking down from an escalator. Yu let out a sigh and walked up. She saw his state, the bandages around his head, his arm in a sling, and the woman took a deep breath as she came up to Peter, embracing him. Hey you, Peter muttered, hugging her as best as he could with one arm. How are you? She asked, pulling away to have a better look at him. Well, I'm in one piece. He shrugged, looking at his suitcase being ferried along by fancy-looking valets. There were 2 of them to be exact. Must have been with the Yaoyorozus. Can't say the same for the rental though. She blinked, brain stuttering for a moment. You got caught in a terrorist attack and you're joking about the suit. Ooh off. Yu groaned out, not sure whether to bonk her ward upside the head or laugh. She only hugged him tighter. You stupid cow. Sorry you, F for making you worry. The joking tone in his voice disappeared for a moment. Should be, Yu muttered under her breath, before separating and looking at him face to face. She let out a small smile. You're going to be spending the night at UA's infirmary, recovery girls on standby. Yeah, All Might told us before we left. Peter yawned a bit. I can go for a bit of a snooze myself. He turned, and Yu followed his gaze. Hatsume, the crazy inventor girl Peter took with him as his +1, was talking with her family. Her father had literal binoculars for eyes, and her mother also had pink hair as they embraced her. I believe these are Parker-san's bags. The valet spoke. Here, let me. Yu bent down, picking up the 2 and pulling the handles. She saw Peter reach for one with his good arm. Can still pull one, he said. Hey Peter. Peter-san, said 2 voices as Peter turned, and the well-dressed black-haired Yaoyorozu Momo approached, as did the more casual-looking Hatsume. So, you gonna get better soon, yeah? Hatsume inquired. Yeah, Peter smiled lightly. The targets in the girl's yellow eyes seemed to zoom, and the pinkette seemed to brighten up. Peter-san, Yaoyorozu got his attention and smiled lightly. Keep in touch, I'd like to know how your recovery proceeds. Yeah we can talk later about the Yu. Yu followed his eyes, seeing the Yaoyorozu parents standing off to the side the thing. Promise. Yaoyorozu bowed towards the blonde and walked off, and Hatsume waved, before trotting over to her parents, leaving just the wall crawler and the giantess hero. You had that grin back. Suo, you flew back with 2 pretty girls, huh? She asked. You? No. Peter sighed. Come on, I deserve a little story on your end on how the flight home went. Anything happened over your dozen hours in the air? It was around 7 hours actually, and I got my butt whooped in chess. Then we watched several movies too. The 2 of them were walking, and you felt a semblance of ease in her. Peter was taking this all too well and in stride, even though he was in a villain attack not even 24 hours ago. Then you remembered. Peter had faced worse, suffered worse. She sighed as they exited the terminal and went over the crosswalk, heading towards the giant parking garage where she was parked. She pushed the thoughts aside. You still gotta tell me. Like, what stuff you did with them. You mused as they got to her car. Well, we did go to Tekka Mechanica and 8,000 MHA. Recovery girl's lips popped as Izuku's form glowed for a moment. Then the boy slumped in his bed and the smaller woman stepped aside. He should be better by morning, Toshinori, she said, before she turned on the muscular titan of a man. All Might winced at the sight, something that Melissa as she stood by the doorway quirked an eyebrow at. And you need to get it through this boy's skull that he needs to stop breaking his bones. She paused, and Melissa felt her eyes upon him as the girl raised her hand. I know about the thing. She spoke in Japanese. You know, musketeer. Melissa smiled bashfully, hoping to keep the fact that her code word for All Might and Izuku's quirk would pass. Thankfully, Peter got his kiss and his guardian took him home to sleep and recover, as he was able to remain awake even after the stamina-draining kiss, according to the little old nurse. And the Todorokis were in another room healing up, based on the dim lights in the room they slept in. It seemed the top healing hero in Japan caught on as she looked back at All Might, her silence pointed enough to carry the question. She's going to be living with me. I am her godfather. All Might shrugged, and the old woman seemed to understand. Fair enough, she said, giving a light yawn herself. Guess I'm gonna have to rest these old bones here overnight it seems. I don't do late night calls like this often, All Might, so be grateful. And I am. All Might bowed at a 90-degree angle, hands clasped in front in gratitude. Thank you so much again for granting my request to heal my students. MMMNN. I'm gonna go to the office and doze off. You know the code to lock up the front door on your way out. She grumbled, walking past as she used her cane. Melissa saw her stop in front and look up at her with sympathetic eyes. For what it's worth, Shield-san, I am sorry for what happened. It's fine. Melissa had a hand on her arm, grasping it and looking away. She dozed off on the plane, but she was feeling the jet lag big time. She turned, eyes finding the sleeping Izuku, specifically his hands covered in bandages. She felt All Might's big paw on her shoulder, then the steam that came from it as she looked up, seeing that warm skeletal smile of her Uncle Might, now in a much baggier suit. Come on, he said in his tired voice. Let's head home. Melissa looked back, again seeing Izuku's hands. As she walked away from the infirmary and the robot nurses wheeled about to close the door, she could see the photos along the wall of UA. Alumni who made it as heroes. Endeavor, Edgeshot, Gang Orca, Mirko, Midnight, Mount Lady, and All Might himself. Melissa got her phone out and tapped a button. A pen popped up as she got to her blueprint app and began to write. Writing something, Uncle Might asked as they got to the elevator. His voice was so different, and yet not. It was strange. Just an outline of ideas, she answered. Start with ideas, anything that came to mind. Then by process of elimination, delete them and leave the remaining ones that best match the hero in mind for the support gear. The hero being in question sleeping in the room behind her. So, let me get this straight. You've tried getting it straight for the past 10 minutes, Peter grumbled, drowsy. You, of course, ignored him, as was her duty as the nosy guardian. You had more than 7 hours to throw some moves on a girl, 2 girls if I'm not mistaken, and you didn't take the opportunity. You ask curiously. 2 girls, who clearly are friendly with you. One whom you hang out at lunch most of the time. The other being the girl you sit next to, and they look pretty decent for their age too. First off, Momo was helping me and May out, Peter clarified. Since when is it a good idea to try and throw some moves in that kind of situation? You blinked once. Oh, you're serious? Peter glared flatly at her. Yeah, I am. Also, her parents were in the next room. Finally, Momo's mom. Looks scary. Not to mention she owns the plane. Oh please, how scary could she be? You demanded as she pushed open the door to their home. She looked like she needed a nap from that long flight is all. You didn't spend up to 8 hours with her in an enclosed space several thousand feet in the air. The apartment was cool, and only a little more messy than it had been when he left. Peter seemed to sigh. You have to be tired after recovery girl smooched you, so get to bed. The woman yawned a bit as she pulled away, turning on only the kitchen light as to better navigate the dark flat. We both need it, she said, walking back to close the door and lock it. Peter smiled softly and turned back into his bedroom, and began to shed off some of his clothes with his good arm. He could feel the drain on his stamina, his eyes heavy as he reached his hand up to pull off his earpiece. He'd shower and clean up in the morning. Peter, you have an email. Karen spoke in his ear, making the boy perk up. About what? Peter yawned, tossing his shirt aside as he began to kick off his sneakers. It seems to be an email from your teacher, Mr. Aizawa. Peter paid no mind, going to put on his pajama shirt. Is he checking in on us? Read for yourself. Peter flipped open his phone, scrolling to the email in question. The title was simple, We Need to Talk. Peter opened it. I wish to speak to you and your guardian, Mount Lady, sometime before the summer camp. Aizawa. Dinner had always been quiet when the Todoroki patriarch was around. No one ever really spoke about their day, beyond the few attempts that Fayumi would have, only for those to peter out almost as soon as they started. Yet, even after getting through most of the main course, neither of them left, neither of them looking to the door in the vague hope that someone would take them out of this situation. It was just a quiet, simple dinner, one that hadn't happened in a long time. Was the trip back comfortable? He asked. Shoto didn't look up from his rice, and Fayumi looked almost sheepish. Dad, it was your private jet, it was very comfortable. I just want to make sure, Enji said. Really, Dad? Fayumi stressed. It was nice. Good, Enji said, fingers fumbling with his own food for a moment. And has anyone called for a comment? They don't even get past the first ring, Shoto said, still not looking up from his food. Enji didn't react, though he could see Fayumi watching the two of them intently. Back when I was a starting hero, he began, I got calls from almost every agency to figure out if I knew what the latest trend was. I couldn't deal with all of them, so I set my mail to send them to a local car dealership. Fayumi laughed, a bit forced, but still good to hear. You sure that was you? I was young, Enji said. I hadn't really gotten used to dealing with press calls. He twirled up some soba and slurped it down. So, before the Tower incident, Enji mused, looking to Fayumi. Did you two have fun? His son turned back, and his only daughter perked up. Have fun? Well, you didn't have a chance to meet with my contacts back there. So what did you do before I landed? Enji asked. Shoto blinked, his eyes as focused on his father as he was unmoving. Oh, Fayumi seemed to brighten up. Well, me and Shoto went to Tekka Mechanica, and we had a bunch of fun with Shoto's friends. Is that so? He said, offering a light nod. If I remember, Parker and Midoriya were there at the tower. I take it you spent time with them. Yes, as well as Yaoyorozu, Shoto replied, almost unsure on how to respond any further. And that inventor girl, Hatsume, Enji quirked an eyebrow. Oh, she's the crazy pink-haired one from the sports festival. You know, the one who made those cool gadgets for Shoto's team during the war, and then had that tech demonstration with Peter Parker afterwards. Fayumi explained before she giggled. Had a good laugh with that. So you went to that theme park? Enji mused as he returned to his soba bowl. Sorry, Shoto cut in, and Enji looked up. For not getting in touch with those business contacts, he said, as if he was uncomfortable trying to talk about teenage things. Lost track of time. It's fine. Enji cut him off, and he felt his son's gaze on him. The people I know were unharmed during the Tower incident. You can always meet them again, just as I will to test the new armor designs. He brought the cold soba to his lips and slurped them all down. I am just happy you had a fun distraction, was what he wanted to say. But the flame hero was left at a loss for words, so he reached to sip some tea once more. Well, excusing the tower and, well, being shot at, Fayumi said, hand to her side. Enji tensed up. Out of the corner of his eye, Shoto was doing and feeling the same. The white-haired woman sat up and smiled. I had a blast, and so did Shoto. At least something good came from this. Okay, everything's all clean around here. You mused as she finished cleaning the dishes, seeing Peter tidy up the living room as he ran the vacuum across the floor in one final sweep. Did you sweep around the kitchen? The American boy asked. Yep, you replied as the blonde-haired woman looked up. Curious as to why your teacher wants to come here. Says he wants to talk. Peter shrugged, looking as confused as her. I told him this morning that he can come by today, and he said he will. He didn't give much of a reason either. Your grades seem to be doing well. What would he want to talk about? Island. You mused, slightly worried. Peter looked back and shrugged. Maybe. I know All Might came around after the USJ fiasco, so I guess Aizawa-sensei is doing that, he said as he began to clean up the vacuum and put it away. Hey Karen, put down a Roomba on things to buy later on, will ya? Of course. Karen spoke over his phone, which was on the dining room counter. And, you'll have to keep quiet this time, Peter said, finger to his lips. I can trust Izuku and the others, but... You told the others about Karen? You asked, and the brown-haired boy shrugged. Terrorist attack. You blinked and nodded. Fair point, I suppose. That and I was the reason for the servers falling under my control. Karen seemed to give out a sigh. Man, Suwo much more room on those servers on Island. You looked at Peter with a concerned look. I know that look, and no, she's not gonna go Skynet, Peter assured his guardian. But yeah, Karen, let's tread on caution here. We can talk after Aizawa has left. Of course. Speaking of whom, he's pulling in now, Karen mused. Peter walked over to his phone as the AI brought up a camera attached to the complex, seeing a car pull over on the curb, and who else but Aizawa shouted coming out, sporting his typical black attire complete with scarf. Okay, look alive. I told the apartment manager that he's coming and what floor we're on. Peter went over to the couch as you finished loading the dishes and then the soap. Done, she said, seeing her living room all clean and put together. The blonde let out a light sigh. What? Is it wrong for me to say that this feels a bit too clean? It's my teacher, you, and there's nothing wrong with being too clean. Especially with you, Peter said as he got up, going to the cupboard to grab a cup to get some water. He pocketed his phone, Karen taking that as a sign to sit back. He didn't have an earpiece either. A minute passed, and then they heard 3 simple knocks as Peter finished his water before he walked to the door and opened it. "Good morning, sensei," Peter said with a light smile, a far cry from the constant frown and shaggy disposition of his black-haired teacher. "Welcome to, well, our home." "Morning, Parker," Aizawa droned, his head turning to see you on the couch. "Mount Lady." Hey, Eraserhead. You stretched her arms as she walked up to him. "So, Peter told me you needed to talk to me. The both of you. I find it prudent to do that since you are his guardian." Aizawa elaborated as he walked inside. "Need anything to drink?" Peter offered. "Water, please," Aizawa replied as he took a seat opposite from you on a chair, and as Peter filled up the glasses, he knew his place was beside his guardian as he returned with a glass for you and his teacher. He then sat down next to you before he felt Aizawa's gaze fixed upon him. "How are you feeling?" "Recovery girl's medical report told me you got banged up," Aizawa asked. "I'm doing fine." Peter rubbed the spot on his arm where he got shot. "She fixed me up good." "And you, Mount Lady?" Aizawa asked, his eyes on the blonde. "Was worried but All Might was there." "Endeavor too," she explained. "So why are you here?" "Just for that." Aizawa fixed his gaze upon Peter and he took a deep breath. "So, you say you're fine, yet you were in a terrorist attack and were fired upon by mercenaries shooting to kill." "Well, yeah." Peter shrugged. "I mean, I've been through worse and all." Aizawa looked at him for a moment. "Not many students can say they've seen something worse," he said rather pointedly. Peter looked to the side. "Well, I mean, there was the USJ. That was pretty rough." Aizawa stared at him. "True, but you weren't thinking about the USJ. When you said that, were you, Parker?" Peter almost winced. Don't know what you mean." The teacher kept his silence for a moment, observing the boy's reactions as Peter fidgeted and shifted where he sat. "Would you like to try again?" he asked, giving the boy a chance to come clean. It was Mount Lady who spoke then, now sounding more than a little cross. "There a question here, Eraserhead?" It's obvious that Parker's had experience in violent altercations before coming to UA. He drawled. "I'd like him to come clean about it himself." Peter looked away but didn't answer, and Aizawa had to suppress the urge to sigh. "Does Titan ring a bell, Parker?" Suddenly, there was a change in the room as Peter felt his blood run cold. His heart stopped as his eyes slowly began to widen. "Excuse me, what?" you asked. "Titan, what are you talk?" Peter. Her curiosity vanished, instant worry in her voice. Peter's jaw was clenched, his hands gripping his jeans as he heard the name reverberate in his head. Titan. That place, that damn place that he wanted to forget. He had to forget. His gauntlet around his neck. The fire and fury raining down. The failure of defeat. The numbness from his heels clawing all the way up his body. Peter looked up at his teacher and his eyes were distant as he remained deathly still. "How?" he asked in English. Aizawa said nothing, his face neutral. And then Peter saw his expression change. The man's shoulders slumped as he exhaled through his nose. "How do you know?" Peter demanded. Aizawa took a slow deep breath, rubbing at his chin with one hand as he muttered to himself almost too quietly to hear. His eyes moved back and forth across the coffee table. Collective delusion or true? Problematic either way. He turned his eyes to Peter. "I was an investigator before I was a teacher, Parker. How I know is simple. I did legwork." "You were investigating him." "Your own student," you hissed before she stood, hands slamming down into the table. "What bug crawled up your ass?" "The fuck Eraser. Random student with a powerful quirk, arrives at UA, out of nowhere with bleeding edge support gear, highly experienced utilizing his quirk in combat. And no sightings in America or Japan before quite literally crashing into you." The man shrugged, unperturbed by the heat in her glare, not even flinching. "Yes, I did." Peter stared at him, the gears in his head turning. "Fukuda." "He didn't say a word actually." Aizawa shrugged, getting information, which I'm still not wholly sold on by the way, was quite the runaround. Peter's brain kept on turning, thinking, that old guy. Aizawa nodded. "I worked with him a lot when I was your age." "So?" Peter stayed still, a pit of ice settling in his stomach as he sat there, hands clenched on his jeans. This was a worst-case scenario back home. Thankfully, Aunt May took it well and supported him, but Aizawa was no Aunt May, and what he found. "What are you going to do now?" Peter asked, looking up, his eyes hard. Aizawa stared back. A long moment of tense silence passed before Aizawa sighed. "Stick to the ceiling for a moment, Parker." Peter blinked, caught off guard by the sudden, strange request. "Why?" "Humor me." Not understanding but not really willing to drag out a session of 20 questions. He stood from his seat and with a single upwards leap, he was up and on the ceiling. When he looked down, it was to the sight of Aizawa's eyes glowing red and his hair hovering eerily about his head. And Peter suddenly understood. The man was corroborating his quirk as much as he could anyway. After a moment, the man shut off his quirk and sighed, looking decidedly irritated. "Is there a point to this?" you hissed, still glaring crossly at the man. The experiment seemingly being over, Peter allowed himself to drop from the ceiling, landing on his feet beside the chair. "I came here to confirm my suspicions from my investigation, and adjust things going forward if necessary." "And is it?" Peter asked, feeling a pit opening in his stomach. Aizawa's fingers laced together in front of his mouth. "In a way, but likely not the way you're thinking." He took a breath. "If you're crazy, you're dangerous. If what you're saying is true, then things will need to be adjusted. There are a few that quirk's mind can't deactivate outright. Nezu, for example, is immune. Your quirk might fall under the select few that are immune, but it would be an exceedingly high coincidence given its physical nature." Peter raised an eyebrow. "Is that like a really complicated way of saying you believe me?" "It's a way of saying that you're still enjoying the benefit of the doubt, and that I'm inclined to not disbelieve you." He sighed. "Given the parameters of your quirk's clear higher combat applications and your experience with high stress and dangerous situations, there are a few things I'm going to demand of you." "Like what?" You piped up. If her eyes were capable of shooting lasers, she'd be burning a hole quite literally through Eraserhead's skull. "Firstly, I'd like to conduct a physical with you. Get a proper grip of what your quirk can actually do. No holding back this time. There are other things, but for now that is the most pressing." Peter nodded quietly. "When?" "Tomorrow if you're available." "Early?" "Aye." "And if he says no?" You interrupted, looking for all the world like she was ready to leap across this table and attack the man if he so much as gave her even the vaguest notion of an excuse. "That would be ill-advised." "That's not an answer, ass," she hissed. Now, Aizawa met her gaze head-on, just as defiant as she was angry. "I have 19 other students besides Parker, Mount Lady," he said simply. "What he can and can't do, how well he's coping with the stress both real and perceived, and a myriad of other factors all have to come into my decision-making. You need to worry about him, I need to worry about all of them, including Parker." Peter winced and he moved to almost physically grab hold of you as she lurched forward. "Peter isn't dangerous," she snarled. "Not the point," he sighed, gripping the bridge of his nose as if trying to educate a toddler. "Let's paint you a picture. Let's say Parker finds himself in another dangerous situation, something he seems fond of seeking out." Peter winced, memories of Mirko flashing before his mind's eye. A bad blow to the head and he goes down, needs medical attention. His muscles are tightening. He's seizing or he's incoherent, doesn't realize where he is or what he's doing. If I don't know that my quirk can't deactivate his, I might approach, or be comfortable enough to let someone else approach, and Peter's super strength is still active and he winds up hurting someone. You did go to a hero school. You know the damage an unchecked or unaccounted strength quirk can do to a first responder unit. His gaze sharpened. You bit back a curse, clearly unhappy at conceding a point. "You can question my methods all you like, but don't question my motives," he drawled. "I need to know everything about my individual students to make informed decisions and yes, help them." He turned back to Peter. "Now, you're physical. Tomorrow, early." Peter slowly, quietly nodded. "I'm free in the morning." He paused, then cleared his throat. "Will you tell anyone?" Peter asked, feeling Yu's hand clasp into his own. "About this conversation?" Aizawa stood up from his chair. "What's there to tell?" he asked. "You're an American transfer student from far, far away." He shrugged. Peter felt a small, sad excuse of a smirk twitch at his lips. "Promise?" he asked, and Aizawa looked taken aback, blinking for a moment before he saw the pleading look in Peter's eyes. He didn't look annoyed. "I promise." Mount Lady, a moment. She did not look pleased. Then again, maybe she was. If he couldn't hold her back, she could definitely get her hands on the shaggy-haired teacher if he pushed any more of her buttons. He felt Yu release his hand and stand up before he saw the two adults wordlessly go to the front door of the apartment. With the click of a door, he just closed his eyes and did his best to breathe, to remove the tightness in his throat. "I am this close to pulling Peter from UA. Because of this fucking stunt," Yu growled as they walked away from the door, walking to the elevator. Aizawa didn't so much as flinch. "You'd only be hurting your ward and separating him from his friends by doing so," Aizawa replied. "Then why go through all of that bullshit just to tell Peter, hey, come to school, drop down and give me 20. Aizawa turned. "Corroboration," he said, "and assessment. I wasn't lying when I said that delusion or reality, either way would be problematic. If it's true, and at the absolute least Parker believes it to be true, coupled with the events he's gone through within his time in UA, despite what you may think he might need more help than he's letting on." You eyed him before Aizawa continued. "I've read Recovery Girl's medical records on him. The constant insomnia from before the USJ, The fact that he's been here for a year plus, and the fact that he hasn't gotten anything close to treatment regarding what happened to him on Titan. This can point to larger problems brewing under the proverbial hood. He said, he needs monitoring. Unhealthy coping mechanisms are common, or conversely, so is repression. Again, either way is problematic. Then why not tell him in person? You tell a person they need a shrink, see how they react. A typical response is dismissive or defensive. Neither one helps. He turned, looking straight at her. It's time to do more than pay lip service and get mad at assholes like me on convenient occasions. Step up. You're his guardian, so start acting like it. You grit her teeth. Oh, don't you fucking dare. I'll dare, he responded, looking past her and towards the still closed apartment. At the absolute least, he thinks he died. That's the best case scenario, and you thought it can all be brushed under the rug, that it can be ignored. He shook his head. You've been letting him sit on a landmine, and that is on you, he said with a little bit of heat at the end. You winced, feeling that withering glare of his. He sighed, his hand reaching into his pocket. He pulled something out, handing it to you. It was a business card, but rather unprofessional. It featured a name, an address, and phone number, all handwritten too. Who is this? He turned around. When you convince him, call her and set up a meeting. A psychiatrist? She asked as Aizawa walked forward and pressed the button on the elevator. He was silent for a bit before looking back. Yeah, but, you paused, biting her lip as Aizawa put a hand on the door. I mean, she winced, trying to process it all. I don't think there's any qualified shrink who can just speak and poof, Peter is healed. You're right, but getting to talk about his issue, that's his starting line, and that should cover your curriculum for your senior year, Ms. Shield. If you have any questions, UA Principal Nedzu should be able to help. Principal Ed Thomas spoke from the other end of the video call. It was in the afternoon for her in Japan, and she couldn't tell what time of day it was for the principal of iAcademy. But either way, Melissa was glad that he made time for her. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Melissa nodded lightly. This is a big help. Not a problem. We understand your current situation. We're wishing you all the best. The video call came to a close, and Melissa looked over at the unique syllabus made just for her remaining year. She would take any remaining general education courses online, and her main course, being in robotics, engineering, and support sciences, could be done at UA, as she needed a lab and workshop in order to make her creations as per the assignments and to show for class credit. She sat back and took a note of the surroundings of her new home for the year. She had a nice wide room, the most luxurious bed, and a window panning out to the nice and peaceful suburb of Musutafu Ward. Uncle Might no longer had Might Tower, due to his injury. He'd managed to get a nice cozy home where he could blend in and have a quiet life whenever he was in his other form. The backyard had plenty of trees and fences for privacy. Stowing away the syllabus, she connected her phone to her computer and holoprojector, tapping on buttons to bring up the screen she had in mind. There were honestly still mountains of different things that she needed to get to. The amount of computers that would have to be installed in Uncle Might's apartment if she wanted to come close to even the 10th of the progress she normally got on the island would cause a commotion in and of itself. Not that he would mind. He'd probably move heaven and earth to make sure that it all worked out for her, though that was hardly fair. Moving on from that particular headache, the news on the entire debacle was still playing on her feed. Despite the statement that she wouldn't be taking any questions, some people still wanted to get through. Hopefully, getting into her studies would give her more than enough reason to stay away from that particular discussion. She shook her head and shifted her focus onto other matters. Right now, there was a little something that needed a little bit of attention, at least, until Uncle Might was free for the day. Izuku was the next carrier for One for All, and he would one day face the very enemy that even Uncle Might couldn't kill. All for One. She remembered how he fought at Tower, utilizing quick Parker movements with quick strikes and kicks, and when he needed to pack a wallop, he would use his adopted quirk at 100% in his fingers, but they would break very easily. Something to help, while also counting towards one of her inventor's course assignments in creating a new item. What can cover for him? And taking a sticky note from a nearby plain wall, she began to write down whatever that came to mind that could fit into a micro-machine gauntlet. From there, it would be a process of elimination. Pony Tsunotori was not an early riser. It was the American girl in her. No one should ever have to wake up earlier than 8 a.m. But, even though she wasn't someone to wake up at the crack of dawn for training like Kendo-chan, she did try to make up for it by always training consistently. 6 days a week, every week without fail. Even if it was just an hour run, she'd try to do something. So it wasn't much of a surprise to find her entering UA1 early Saturday morning, gym bag in hand, and an iced coffee in another. She smiled at Mr. Kobayakawa, the portly janitor, said hello to the short Miss Dojima from economics and a few other acquaintances before slowly negotiating her way past the groups and everyone else to finally begin her mid-morning routine. Most of the time, the gym was empty since Japanese schools still had set classes for most, and the hero course students who were given the weekends off occasionally for rest and recovery did not typically come to the gym to disobey the order of rest and recovery. At most, she would just see a few stray second or third year students here and there, occasionally kendo when she wanted a change of pace from her dad's dojo or tetsu, though he really didn't enjoy mornings. Sometimes she could find some of the others from class 1 or 2. She waved, they waved, everyone said hello. But she didn't really know them, and she got the feeling they were a little intimidated or shy to speak to an American, unsure if she even knew the language, so they rarely spoke. That was normal. Normalcy, though, was about to take something of a hit today. When she walked into the gym, the first thing she noticed was the bag. It was on the floor. 100 pounds of canvas was just splattered there, its sandy guts spilled all over the padded floors. She blinked, big blue eyes staring in bewildered curiosity at the thing before she turned and looked for whomever had both broken the bag and left it all over the floor. Oh, well, that explained it. You gonna clean this up or what? She asked. The one other person in the room opened his eyes, bringing his head up from where it had been hanging as he leaned forward where he was sitting at the bench, red eyes glaring at her as he breathed heavily. The bag's demise must have been recent. He was drenched in sweat and his breathing sounded ragged. She hadn't heard a similar sound since the both of them had nearly killed themselves rescuing people from that burning building during their internships. "The fuck are you doing here?" he growled, eyes turning back to the floor, seemingly too tired to keep his head up. "It's the UA. Jim," she contested. "Last I checked your name wasn't on the door." There was a pop, like a firecracker going off, which brought her eyes to his hands. His very bandaged, bloody hands. Her eyes widened a bit as she looked at the knuckles more closely, particularly the reddish-brown stains on the bandages, before turning her eyes to the bag again. She found that it wasn't the creases and shadows playing tricks on her eyes, but rather that yes, it actually was a very dark splotch of what could only be blood staining the bag's midriff. She held her silence for a moment, her eyes turning to Bakugo again. Taking a closer look now, he looked like hell. Not just the bloodied knuckles, those were obvious. His face looked haggard, his skin slightly paler, dark circles beginning to form under his eyes. He brought a hand up, one shaking limb running fingers through his hair as he wiped away the sweat. "Unless you want something, fuck off and get to your own goddamn training." His tone was still abrasive, still bellicose and angry as it always was, and just as irritating as she remembered. Even so, she felt compelled to ask, "You okay? Piss off?" She rolled her eyes hard enough to feel a strain at her eyelids as her own anger spiked. "Yup, still an asshole," she mentally confirmed. "That's fine, she could be a bitch too. Yeah, I'll get right on that, after you go get a new bag and hook it up. Was gonna go a few rounds myself. Get these legs and kick in shape." He snarled, teeth bared as he brought his eyes back to her smug ones. "Get your own fucking bag. You break it, you get the replacement. Those are the gym rules last I checked." She pointed to the very convenient notice board by the door. "Or if you like, I can go to your homeroom teacher to complain about you being a dick. It's still early, so I'll probably still manage to snag a spot in the low hundreds of complainers. I'm sure he'll be happy to come down here early in the morning and take a look at you and how you're doing this early in the morning." He glowered, baring his teeth like a coyote, and Pony was pretty sure that if his whole body wasn't using every last scrap of strength it had left to even hold itself upright in its sitting position, he may have just taken a swing at her. She was confident enough in his inability to even move properly right now that she had the audacity of getting within arm's reach and crouching down till they were at eye level. Big blue meeting narrowed red. "So how about we try this again?" She hedged with a smile, a nice wide and cute one. "I'm gonna amend my question on 'Are you okay?' because the answer, even without you bleeding all over the school's nice clean floors, is probably no, given the bag of therapists you couldn't pay enough to handle you and your not so super special problems." She earned another hateful growl with that snark. "So I'll ask instead, why'd you wake up this morning and decide that you just had to wail on school property till your arms fell off and your legs stopped holding you up?" "I'm fine," he hissed. "All right, tough guy," she smirked, arms crossed. "Stand up and prove it, cowboy." She finished in English. The challenge fell like a hammer blow, and Bakugo understood immediately. She nodded to herself. "Stand up, and I'll go kindly fuck off to the other end of the gym and I'll leave you here to brood in peace. Won't see me for the rest of the day, swear on my mother." She was pretty sure that his teeth were grinding so hard one of them was about to chip. Then he shoved himself to his feet. It wasn't a slow thing. He exploded up, standing ramrod straight. He looked like he might hold it for a second. Then he wobbled and fell back down to the bench with a solid clang of his ass meeting the aluminum seat. She didn't try very hard to keep the smug look off her face. It died rather quickly though when she looked at him again. She was used to Bakugo looking angry, annoyed, irritated, even determined. She was less used to him looking miserable. Reminded her of back at Gang Orca's. Except the fire was there but something was off. Like a bucket of cold water had been dumped over the constant raging fire in his chest. She saw him almost sag, his shoulders slumping, the ever-present snarl of his lips becoming a more subdued somber frown. Even the ruby red eyes becoming dull and empty. He looked straight at her when he spoke. Hey, HNN. Pony tilted her head. You ever fuck up something, Hafu? He muttered, almost whispered, and not in a small, fixable way. She let the Hafu comment slide, mulling over his words. Don't think so, she said slowly. I think most mistakes can be fixed. Well, outside of murder, but that goes without saying. His eyes closed, head once more falling forward. Just leave me alone. He didn't say please, but he didn't have to. She could practically feel the word in the air. I need to think. A part of her, a big one, wanted to press a bit more, try a bit more. The rest of her recognized when there was a line, spoken or unspoken. She pulled back, standing up to her full height. She watched him for a moment longer, hoping, in spite of the usual annoyance she had whenever he opened his mouth, that he would find whatever answers he was looking for. Offering a bow, she conceded to the demand and retreated quietly, moving to conduct her own training at the other side of the gym. By the time she returned an hour later, Bakugo was gone, the bag replaced, but the bloodstains remained. Shouta watched from the sidelines the same way that he did with every quirk test that he'd ever had to examine in his time in UA. Normally, a second one was never required. Students, at their core, were teenagers. Most of them were at the age where they wanted to show off, to stand out among their peers and make something of themselves, especially in something as competitive as the hero business. But for every rule, there were exceptions. He watched Peter finish the last of his tests, sweating up a storm, a sure sign of him at least trying halfway decently at the tests before him. A quick click of his phone showed him the results of the current throw. It matched the rest of the results, held on the same training field. As expected, blowing his initial tests out of the water, just like every other test he'd taken today, and blasting through the weight room far above any in this school's strength class, save for maybe Midoriya when he was going to bust a finger. Anything else, sensei? Parker asked, rolling his shoulder to prevent a cramp. Just one more test that I need to check. What's he stopped, ducking on instinct, forcing the rubber pellet to pass harmlessly over his head and hitting Shouta in the chest. The cushioned piece fell to the ground, barely making a tap and letting Shouta write down another piece of data on his clipboard. Double-checking your reactions, Shouta said, picking up the piece and squeezing it to show the amount of give it had. Specially made from the support lab, we use them to mimic live fire situations for those without durability quirks. Even point blank, you would feel more from a friend flicking you than getting hit by these. Omnidirectional, automatic. Precognition more advanced than anticipated. Could have warned me, Parker grumbled. Defeats the purpose of a test. A sniper doesn't exactly broadcast their position, Shouta deadpanned. Do they? Snipe did, Parker rebuked. Snipe can make his bullets hit whatever he wants, Shouta said, turning back to his board. Any that had a chance at hitting you weren't going to cause damage. Not to mention he's a teacher, not a trained assassin. Parker blinked twice. Is it bad that every day I find out this school is a lot more intense than I thought before? You get used to it. Another blink. Did you just make a joke? Now, it was Shouta's turn to blink. He suppressed a grumble, a memory of green hair, good laughter and a beaming grin coming to his mind's eye as he scratched his head. No, just stating facts. It sounds like a joke. Good day, Parker, Shouta grumbled, turning back to his notes. The American shrugged. All right, see you later, sensei. He waved. The black-haired man kept on walking, and gave a lazy wave of his own hand in response. Want me to hack his email? Karen, we discussed this, Peter said as he finished putting on his earpiece, getting changed in the empty locker room. He had finished his shower and was packing his dirty UA gym uniform in his backpack. You're not going after Aizawa. He did commit a breach of privacy that no teacher should do to their students, at least from what I can remember of the various laws in our old world. Yeah, well, this is a new one, and Peter shrugged, stuffing his pants in his backpack and zipping up. We just gotta deal with it. Like always. Yo, Parker. A voice made him pause, and Peter's thoughts were pushed aside as he turned. Out here in the humid July afternoon was none other than Aoyama Yuga and Kaminari Denki. Peter smiled. Hey, Kaminari, Aoyama. Peter walked up to them, seeing that the two were in normal attire of sorts. "What are you guys doing here over the summer?" "Taking Aizawa-sensei's supplementary lessons," Kaminari said, hands behind his head. "He gave us an offer the day after the final exams that he could offer hands-on tutelage in the form of daily 1-hour lessons between now and the summer camp." Aoyama agreed. "It was that, or take Z lessons during Z camp itself. And if my shining twinkling must become more luminous, I cannot be juggling too much at once, non." "Yeah," Kaminari shrugged. "Killed any sweet vacation plans, but at least we're doing some neat stuff with Aizawa-sensei though." The blonde seemed to beam. Peter let out a chuckle. "I'm glad for you too. So what are you doing here, Parker?" Aoyama inquired. "Last I checked, one like you hardly needs supplemental training." "Yes." "Oh, just here for a little workout is all." Peter rolled his arm about. "Got banged up at Island. Gotta make sure I'm in top shape, you know." "Yeah, I heard about that. You were involved?" Kaminari asked, concern evident in his voice. "Man, must have been scary dealing with villains like those." "You doing okay?" "I got out of it fine, so no worries, dude." Peter shrugged. "I hope you two improve during your lessons. It's probably gonna be more lecture stuff for an hour, like on some villain psychology and whatnot." And he's teaching me how to bargain better too." Heh. Kaminari let out a sigh after his little wry chuckle. "I mean, Aizawa can be a bit of a hard-ass, but man, he knows his stuff and he's a hell of a teacher." "We are in agreement. Now let's go. Aizawa-sensei will not be happy with us if we are tardy non," Aoyama said before bowing lightly to Peter. "Take care, Deputy Representative." "Yeah, see you around." Kaminari patted Peter on the shoulder as Peter saw them walk off. "Peter, a text." Karen spoke in his ear as he went to his phone. "Hey Peter, I was wondering if you wanted to talk today. Finish what we started on the plane." It was from Momo. "Well, time to introduce you to her," Peter murmured as he got to texting. "Yeah, wanna meet for coffee? There's a Starbucks close to UA. Went over there for a workout." "Sound good." The response was immediate. "I'll see you there. At least that should brighten your day," Karen said as Peter pocketed his phone and began to walk out into UA's front courtyard, taking in the sunshine as the cloud cover came in at the right moment. "I imagine you talking to others about yourself on your own terms is more preferable." This was bound to happen anyway. Peter shrugged. "Plus, I trust her like I do with Izuku and Shoto." "Trust them enough to tell everything?" Karen asked, and Peter paused, taking a sigh as he looked down the hill, seeing downtown and making his way there, if his sense of direction was up to date. "Let's worry about that bridge when we cross it." "Fair enough." Peter noticed some passerby staring at him, along with waves and cameras pointed his way. Still the iconic sports festival first-year champion and all. He rubbed the back of his head, blushing lightly as he finally made his way to the Starbucks. He got inside, ordered a chocolate chip cookie and sat outside under a table and umbrella, setting his backpack on another chair to save a spot. And so he began to wait, checking through his phone as his mind wandered. And he could remember the words. "If you're crazy, you're dangerous. If what you're saying is true, then things will need to be adjusted. Because somewhere deep inside you stopped giving a shit if you actually do die. And if it doesn't matter to you, it shouldn't matter to anyone else, right? I wanted you to be better." Peter clenched his jaw, setting his phone down and running a hand down his face. "Peter-san," said a voice, and breaking through his wandering thoughts, he perked up as he sat forward. True enough, standing there was Yaoyorozu Momo, dressed in a casual violet blouse, blue jeans and carrying what was maybe the most expensive purse he'd ever seen. The black-haired girl tilted her head to the side. "Hello there." Peter smiled, removing his backpack from the chair. "How's it going, Momo-san?" "Day's going fine. Did some training this morning." Momo shrugged, taking her seat. "Would you like any coffee at all? I can get in line for you if you like." Momo shook her head. "I'm quite alright, I don't enjoy coffee myself." "Haha, same here actually. Fun fact, you know spiders can get drunk if they take in caffeine." I never knew that," Momo asked, before her eyes widened. "Did you experience this firsthand then?" Yep. Peter shrugged sheepishly. "Made a whole mess in my room. Took the whole day to get my webbing cleaned up." He saw Momo still looking a little pensive. The two fell into silence for a moment, and Peter got the impression that the girl was curious, but perhaps a little too polite to just flat out ask again. So he decided to just go for it. "So, remember back on the plane how I said Karen was and kinda wasn't my guidance counselor?" he said, and Momo nodded. He reached into his backpack, pulling out one of his spare earpieces. "Here, how about you meet her yourself?" The black-haired beauty blinked and took the earpiece before she placed it in her ear, looking confused. "Hello there, Yaoyorozu-san." The AI spoke in clear Japanese. "My name is Karen, and I am Peter's guidance counselor." "Okay." Momo seemed to take it in stride. Nice to meet you, Karen-san. And I am also his personal assistant. And I'm also the one who texted you that night. When Peter's phone was in All Might's hands, Karen was a gift given to me by my hero, Peter said. And she is my friend. I wanted you to meet her. Momo's eyes blinked. Given to you. Oh, and I am an artificial intelligence. Karen clarified, and Peter saw Momo's eyes widen almost to a comical degree. Fear me, she added with a rueful chuckle. Momo seemed to think for a moment before she looked to Peter. Peter-san, you really don't have to come up with some story. Take a look at your phone, dear. Karen chimed into their ears. Momo raised an eyebrow before fishing her phone out of her purse, activating the screen. Her eyes widened again as the screen flickered between streams of data and applications. What are you doing? She asked, perusing over your personal files on this phone. Historical app usage, backtracking personal markers. Here you go. Momo's screen flickered again. If I'm not mistaken, and I'm not, these would be your personal passwords for your UA account, your numerical password for your phone, the number and numerical password for your checking account, and your personal emails. Karen, Peter squawked in protest. It is the fastest way to prove the AI thing, Peter. Overkill is a word you know. He shot back, looking nervously at Momo. Thankfully they were outside in the hustle and bustle of the crowd and city going on around them. Momo took a slow, deep breath, staring at her phone display with a wide-eyed sort of dismay. Disbelief before her eyes moved to Peter, then back to her phone before slowly shutting it off. Peter hoped she didn't start screaming or something. She seemed to gather her composure and took a deep breath before she placed the phone back in her purse. I assume she's otherwise friendly. I come fully upgraded with baking recipes. The AI chimed in. Friendly people always bake. Peter ran a hand down his face. Okay, so you have an artificial intelligence. This is not what I was expecting, she whispered quietly. So yeah, wanted to, you know, clear the air on that. She's been someone important to me. I hope my being here helps answer any questions for you. And if you have any questions as well, don't be afraid to ask. Karen responded, and Momo looked back to Peter. So am I the only one who knows? Midoriya and Todoroki know. Peter nodded, as does Todoroki's sister and Hatsume. Oh, and Melissa Shield too. They all kinda found out during Island. Karen needed to hack their servers to get control back from the mercs. She nodded. I see. So, can you keep this on the down low? He whispered back. They'd been whispering a lot today. You know, super AI from America and all. Momo nodded. Of course. Though, I have to wonder who created it and why he would keep it a secret. She can emulate emotions at the very least, or give a decent enough simulacrum. This kind of technology, it's ludicrously advanced from my amateur understanding of such things. Even when compared to the AI and the robots in UA, I don't know of anyone who could make it, let alone simply make one so easily as to give it away. She seemed to be thinking aloud. At this point she wasn't looking at him, which Peter was thankful for because he failed to fully hide his cringe. That was a little too close to the truth. So, yeah, that's Karen. Peter shrugged, smiling awkwardly. She seemed to pull herself away from her musings, for now at least. Yes, she nodded. Well, I'm pleased to meet you. The two sat in silence for a moment. Then Momo leaned forward, her hands cupping her face. I have so very many more questions now. Peter tried to offer a smile. Well, let's ask him over some food, he suggested while standing. There's a pizza place down the road. My treat, huh? The girl nodded clearly, still mulling her own thoughts in her head. Karen chimed in. If you both take the extra time to walk 2 extra blocks, another pizza place is 6.7% better by metric of user reviews and inspection of their ingredient purchase receipts. It was a simple set of things to do, carrying a few things to a normal house while doing his best not to let anything drop. An easy thing to do, even without one for all, though it still made him nervous. Be really careful with that, Melissa said. The processors are very delicate. I am doing my best, Izuku said, trying to gently force his way through the open doors. A second set of hands managed to take a good chunk of the weight from him. Just through here, All Might called from behind the box. Izuku nodded, but the blonde hero could hardly see him. So Izuku just did what he could, and managed to get into the house. A decent chunk of the space was filled with moving boxes. Everything from clothes to computer parts, it was all here. Or at least, he hoped it was the last of it. Anything else? Izuku asked, and part of him prayed. No, that should be perfect, Melissa said. Thanks, Izuku. Happy to help. Please take a glass of water. All Might interrupted, going straight to the fridge while Melissa beamed slightly. Least I can do after calling you over. Wasn't doing too much, Izuku said. I've mostly just been training and studying. And that isn't going to stop for a while, All Might said, bringing over 3 different drinks. He handed one to both of the children there and tried to throw on a happy-go-lucky smile. Cheers to the summer, what we can finally have of it. And maybe we can be normal, the blonde man offered. Izuku shared a look with Melissa that made the #1 hero's shoulders slump. Not your best speech, Uncle Might, Melissa said. Everyone's a critic, the blonde man fake grumbled, taking a long swig of his drink. Izuku and Melissa looked back at each other and shared a little laugh. If she were being perfectly honest with herself, Ochako wasn't sure if her visit was warranted. After all, Hatsume was a bouncing ball of manic energy that most people, herself included, could seemingly only handle in small doses. If she had to name the girl's friends, the list would be very short, starting and ending with Peterparker. But she had heard about what happened on Island, and the thought of no one even asking if you were okay after that kind of thing was honestly too sad to think about. Hell, she was likely one of the few who knew May was going to Island in the first place, since she'd caught the girl with a request just before she and Peterson had left. So, being who she was, she decided to do something about it. Strapping on her non-lazy boots that morning, she peeled herself out of bed and out of the house, making her way down to UA, only realizing as she made her way through the halls that she hadn't actually called to confirm May was at the UA workshop today. After all, Hatsume was there most days, practically lived in the place, but the whole reason she was here in the first place was to check on the girl. Island might be enough reason for Hatsume to take a few days off to rest and recover. Oh well, she was here already, so might as well check and make sure. When she made it to the workshop doors, they were sealed, but she did see that the lights were on. Knowing enough about the workshop to know the lights shut off automatically when there was no movement inside, after a few minutes she knocked gently. Hello? When she didn't get an answer, part of her contemplated turning and walking away. The other part of her slowly pried open the door. Hello? She called again. Peeking into the workshop, the round-faced girl looked through the cavalcade of mess and loose tools. She almost didn't see her at all. She'd never seen Hatsume look so still. Hatsume was sitting on the floor, her knees brought up so high that her forehead could rest on them, arms wrapped around her legs. Ochako's heart lurched and hoped the girl was only sleeping in here like she usually did. Somehow she doubted it. She moved forward, hesitating as she reached out. Hatsume, are you okay? Her voice finally seemed to pierce the fugue around the girl, and she lifted her head. Ochako could see the redness in her eyes as Hatsume stared up at her, blinking rapidly. Oh, right, I promised to make you your item. Like the girl was in a daze, Ochako saw her uncoil herself, robotically climbing to her feet, and just as mechanically stumble towards her workbench. Hey, she called. Don't worry about the item. Are you okay? Hatsume shook her head, and when her hands grabbed at her tools they did so with more force than necessary, metal clanging against metal as May spoke. No, you're heroes, and heroes need support items. That's how we can help, right? That's the way we can help when you're out there getting shot. Her hands moved amongst the wiring, nuts and bolts, May putting them together like she was arranging pieces of a puzzle, but Ochako could see the girl wasn't even looking at her work, wasn't even talking directly at her. Not until she looked at her fellow student. Hatsume brought her target like eyes up, staring at the gravity quirk user, almost pleading for an answer as she sniffled, the tears glimmering at the back of her eyes but still not falling. I'm supposed to be good at that, right? She yelled. I make the items so your jobs are less dangerous, so you guys don't get hurt, right? Her fingers gripped the edge of the workbench now, clenching so hard that they were almost white-knuckled. Ochako stepped forward as Hatsume's face crumpled, her eyes shutting tight as she seemingly tried to will herself back into some semblance of calm. Ochako stepped around the workbench and gently pulled May's wrists away from their hard grip. The next thing she knew, Hatsume was clutching at her, squeezing her tight enough for it to be painful. But she didn't dare complain, or do anything other than hug the pink-haired girl back as she cried, sobbing loudly into Ochako's shoulder. He was hurt. There was so much blood. I couldn't do anything, she cried. Ochako began to cry with her, whispering reassurances and rubbing circles on her back. She was scared to see the normally cheerful Hatsume like this, but grateful she'd mustered up the motivation to come by and check on her. 3 weeks later, it went without saying, but this was probably the only time that Izuku found himself rather glad to be attending a school event while summer break was supposed to be happening. UA had given them chance after chance to prove themselves, and now they were going to a hero-sponsored camp. How good could you get? Though, it was dampened by the fact that All Might wouldn't be able to join them. Too much to do with Melissa, and the growing situation with the League of Villains after the Island attack. Anyone else wondering why we're taking a bus? Peter asked. Izuku shrugged as the two of them dragged their backpacks towards the designated area. It's just a vehicle to take us somewhere, Yaoyorozu pointed out. It's hardly a strange thing. But the school has giant robots, Peter pointed out. And? The class representative asked. Peter sighed as Kirishima patted him on the back. No worries, Ace. I wanted to drive a giant robot too. He looked at everyone, but Izuku could only give out a little chuckle. He saw a collection of students approach as well. It was Class 1B. Oh, what's this? Wailed a voice loudly. Izuku blinked, and their leading the pack was a blonde-haired boy with blue eyes. I heard some of you failed in your finals. Does that mean you lot have to take extra less? Yeah, we did. Kaminari raised a hand, Aoyama by his side as he cut off Monoma. Yeah, that was his name. And we already got them done. So we get to take the camp with the rest of our class. He winked, giving the half-French boy a high five, to which he obliged, sparkling, and as they connected, the two beaming. Monoma Nito gawked, freezing on the spot while blinking. Oh, well, too bad for you. Guess you kissed your summer vacation good. Bonk. Izuku winced as Monoma went out like a light, the red-haired kendo behind him with her hand raised as she propped up the blonde-haired boy. She waved back an apology, and Peter noticed Pony off to the side. She gave a little wave, and he returned it in kind. All right, everyone. Ida Tenya yelled out. Let's get going on the buses, he said with his arms moving about. Before long, all of the students got onto the buses with Aizawa-sensei boarding last. Class 1 had their own bus. Flad King had Class 1B, and off they went, leaving the Tokyo area. Peter took his seat beside Izuku. Across from him sat Todoroki and Yaoyorozu. So, what do you think the summer camp will have? Asked Izuku as he looked back to Peter. And how was your 3 weeks? Do anything? Well, in order. Peter mused, hands behind his head. He then perked up, noticing Yaoyorozu across the aisle with Todoroki as the bus was soon allowed with the chatter of their peers. He leaned in while cupping his hand. Izuku blinked and followed suit. Showed Karen to Yaoyorozu, so she knows now. Izuku blinked, getting his phone out and sending a text to Yaoyorozu. Do you know about Peter's friend? Karen Sam. Send. Momo looked into her bag, hearing a ping as she reached down to pull it out. Todoroki looking back as she looked at her phone, then back at the duo. She nodded and texted back. I do, yes. To Izuku's surprise, the text between him and Yaoyorozu changed into a 3-person group text. Oh, and good morning, kids. Hope you have fun at your summer camp as well. Izuku's eyes widened as Yaoyorozu blinked at Karen's text. Hey, stop spooking them, Peter murmured, talking into his earpiece. It's fine. Yaoyorozu shrugged. I got used to it personally. She went back to her phone. Soon the group expanded, as Izuku noticed Peter's contact being added, as well as Todoroki's. Plus this bus ride seems to be deafening us. Everyone seems so excited for the camp. Yaoyorozu typed. Todoroki perked up, reaching into his phone and looking it over. Oh, guess I'm in this, aren't I? Todoroki sent. Hello there too, Todoroki-san. Karen. Hello. So yeah, this camp seems to be of Aizawa's making. $100 says it's gonna be hell. Peter typed in. A fair bet. Yaoyorozu replied. I can believe it. Izuku murmured as he typed it in too. Wonder how long the ride is going to be. Peter asked. Let me look. Bus GPS has you going to the Nagano Prefecture, about an hour away. Plenty of national parks for camps to be set at, along with over a dozen hero agencies, Karen said, and in their text window, a map of the Nagano Prefecture, with it being a hyperlink. Izuku tapped on it and perked up. As for hero agencies, I cannot specify which. Nagano, if I remember right. That prefecture has the Wood Knights Agency, Freebird's Agency, the Wild Pussycats. Izuku murmured under his breath. How come you cannot say which ones? It can be an edge for us. Todoroki sent. Academic safeguard. This is a school activity. All I did was tell you where you're going. Karen replied. Fair, we're in Nagano, but quite a ways away from the nearest hero agency. Curious. Karen spoke in Peter's ear as Aizawa told everyone to get out. Murmurs of confusion broke out as Aizawa walked on ahead. There was a simple car close by. There's a reason why we stopped. Aizawa spoke out. Hey, I recognize this place. Uraraka shouted. You do? Jiru asked. Why didn't you speak up earlier? I took a nap. G.I. The brunette held her arms, shivering. I know that feeling. That car. Oh, squealed a voice. Is that our kitten? It's been a while. And out from the car leaped 2 figures. Welcome cubs of UA. They wore bright and colorful skirts and blouses, the blonde woman wearing sky blue and the brunette donning maroon with white highlights. They posed, the blonde standing tall and the brunette thrusting her arms out. They also had cat tails, metallic ears, and paw-like gloves. The wild pussycats. They shouted in unison and pride. Although they were not alone, with a black-haired boy with a deep scowl and cap standing off to the side. Oh, so it is this one. After Peter nudged Izuku before he could gush, feeling his spider sense perk up of a potential Midori mumble incoming. Easy skipper. These are the pro heroes who will be helping us for this week. Aizawa turned towards the duo. Thank you for coming out here and on time. Not that he seemed to stop Izuku, but this is the super specialized hero team that focuses on mountain and forest situations, especially rescue missions, and they've been in business for over a decade too. Pixie Bob and Mandalay are amongst the best in the Busey. Tingle, and the blonde got a paw right in Izuku's face, her face still grinning mad as the boy was flummoxed by her speed. Peter leaned back in shock, stepping back until he was with Kaminari and Kirishima. I'm pretty sure your math is off, she said proudly. Then there was a pause as she had her other glove raised. I'm 18 at heart. That is so sad. So, Uraraka, have you been doing well? The other woman said as the blonde kept her paw on the frantic Izuku's face. Oh, Mandalay. Doing great, she said, beaming, but also showing a little nervousness. Doing hero work and all. Life of a hero student schoolgirl. Hahaha, she laughed loudly. The woman, Mandalay, patted her on the shoulder. Don't worry, you'll get the eye of the tiger in no time, she said with an almost too assuring smile. Besides, it's 9:30 now. I reckon you and your classmates can make it to the lodge in time for lunch. Me and Pixie Bob have faith in you to lead your fellow cubs to our den, much like how you did for those amazing obstacle courses we did together. Okay, taking the cat thing a bit too far. Was it part of their gimmick? Had to be. Then again, Mirko had an obsession with carrots. Maybe their quirks were cat-related. He saw the brunette turn towards the blonde, Pixie Bob apparently, and the girl let go of Izuku, and grinned. Aizawa stepped back a bit. Uraraka went pale as a sheet, and she sprinted for the ledge. Every man for himself. And off she went, curling in a ball and floating down below. Well, she caught on, Aizawa murmured, and suddenly Peter felt his spider sense nudging him a bit. His fellow students looking in confusion. As for why we stopped here, kids, well, you're training. Pixie Bob reared her paws back, grinning devilishly. Peter's spider sense was now on alert as he reached his hands into his pockets, grabbing the webbed shooters and latching them on quickly with a flick of the wrist. He was caught flat-footed at Hightower. Not this time. Begins now. The moment Pixie Bob's hands touched the ground, a mudslide roared into existence, catching all of Class 1A and sending them over the cliff. Peter had leapt out, seeing the earth roar behind him, and the screams of his fellow surprised peers. And thus, the summer camp for Class 1A and Class 1B had begun. Peter felt the wind through his hair as he fell down into the forest below. He twisted in midair, passing through the branches and landing on both feet like a cat as the mud came on down. He turned, seeing the mass of land carrying his peers as he ran over to them. You guys all right? He called out, digging through the mud and tugging on the first hand he saw, revealing it to be Kaminari's. Bleak. Think I got some in my teeth. He spat off to the side. Peter saw others clawing their way out of the mud. If the ensuing explosion was any indication, Bakugo seemed unhurt, the blonde letting out a curse as he stomped out of his pile of debris. Ignoring his classmate, Peter approached Hagakura's flailing school uniform, who also had clumps of mud in her hair. He bent down and took her hand. Eck, I just got a manicure. Stupid Aizawa-sensei. Hagakura cursed as she took Peter's hand. Thanks for the help, Parker-san. She began to dust herself off. Don't mention it. He looked around, seeing Momo and Izuku get up from the mud, followed by most of the others. He ran on over, seeing Izuku bend down to help clear some mud off of Tsuyu and Momo pulling Jiru out. What the hell was? Jiru coughed. Friggin' sensei. When is he not a jerk? When he helped in the USJ. Kaminari groaned as he brushed off his clothes. You know what I mean. Is everyone alright? Momo called out, standing up and walking around, checking on most of the other students. Pajiro-kun might have hit his head. Uraraka called, finger to her nose. Eyes on my finger. And follow it. Tionanangh. The blonde-tailed boy grunted as Peter walked over, Momo and Izuku shadowing him. How is he? Might be a little concussed, Uraraka said, getting up and frowning. Pixie Bob-san really needs to hold back a little here. I was lucky I didn't get knocked upside the head. Say, speaking of that, Uraraka-san, Izuku spoke up. You jumped off the cliff as if you knew what was coming. The brunette twitched, looking a little pale. Did you do this as part of your training with the wild pussycats? Yeah, same exercise too. Uraraka fiddled with her fingers. Sorry for not giving you guys a heads up. It was just all so fast and I got my fair share of bumps and bruises from that. Come on, girlfriend. Give us a warning here. Ashido shook her fist. It's gonna take forever to get the mud out of my hair. Beside her, Shoji was shaking his head to get dirt out of his ears before he shook his arms. Uraraka looked sheepish. Yeah, totally not cool for Aizawa to at least say something before haha mudslide begin your training. Seriously, Zero grumbled as he patted his elbows, some dirt leaving his tape jets. He knew Uraraka had an idea of what kind of exercise Pixie Bob was going to put us through, since she undertook it with her training. Izuku turned towards Uraraka. Then it must mean we must look to her for guidance. Bakugo spat out some dirt. So he expects us to follow round face here. He growled out. He does. Momo spoke up, stepping up. Aizawa did say this is training, and the sound of her stomach cut into her authoritative response, making her blush. I imagine time would be of the essence. Your stomach said it, I'm feeling hungry, Kirishima said as he walked over. Didn't she mention us getting to lunch possibly? Yeah, this exercise is a trek through the beast's forest, Uraraka spoke. Gotta get through it, survive the monsters inside and we get food. The girl noticed the others perk up. Wait, monsters? Zero gawked. What kind are we talking about? Peter inquired. He heard the ground rumble beneath his feet, making him turn around, looking beyond the trees. Giant house-sized monsters, all made of dirt, soil and roots. Some looked like giant saber-toothed tigers. Others were bipedal dinosaurs. Peter even saw one go up into the air. They fly too, Uraraka mentioned. Can you please speak up more often, woman? Zero barked as the other students got into position. Several beams of light lanced out, striking the incoming monsters in the heads as they roared out and crashed to the ground, crumbling. Alan's why Monami, Aoyama yelled, his navel laser ring around his midriff lighting up as he focused. Hey Parker, Peter, stunned upon seeing the usually flamboyant and flashy Aoyama acting so serious, yanked himself back to the situation at hand upon being called upon as he turned his head towards the source. Give me a boost, Kaminari yelled as he ran toward his classmate. Peter dropped to one knee, hands cupped together. Say I know, Peter yelled as Kaminari stepped onto his hands and Peter launched him into the air right as the flying beast was approaching. The blonde focused his hands towards his target. 1,000,000 volts, Kaminari yelled as he fired a lance of lightning outward from gloves, some kind of support gloves. Kamiyari. The resulting spear cut the beast right down the middle, the golem crumbling into dirt and soil as it fell to the ground. Someone catch me, Dark Shadow, Takoyami commanded, and from his shirt, the black familiar raced forth with an eye, catching the blonde and bringing him back down by the scruff of his shirt. Whoa eraser, Pixie Bob mused on the bus as she tapped on her goggles, keeping tabs on the students no doubt via cameras placed throughout the forest. Lost some of my beasts already. To whom? Shouter replied, happy to have some peace and quiet. Mandalay was driving the car with her nephew behind them. Vlad took another route with his class. The blonde boys, Aoyama Yuga and Kaminari Denki if I remember correctly. They took them out fast while everyone else was still trying to collect themselves. Shouta felt his lip twitch, a ghost of a smirk on his face. It is to be expected. I've had an hour a day with those two for the past month. Knowing that those two and not the more destructive and powerful members of the class responded. It was pleasing to hear. Hee, want me to step it up a notch? Make some more? Pixie Bob asked. Don't you have 100 of those things in there? The shaggy-haired man asked. In the forest, that is. I can make more if we get to that overlook over there. Shouta was quiet, blinking. Driver, pull over to that spot. And Pixie Bob grinned, rubbing her paws together. Nayahaha. Well, Kaminari, where did they come from? Zero asked in surprise. Jiru stood to the side, mouth agog. God's spear. Seeing Kaminari land on his feet, he shook off his hands, electric tea cackling around them. Oh, it's a play on his name. Clever, Peter mused to himself. Kaminari smirked, giving a thumbs up. I failed my final, but I got stronger to make up for it. Even commissioned some new support gear too. He showed off his gloves, beaming and preening, and all the while, can channel my electricity better now. See? Jiru marched up and grabbed the boy by his cheeks, making him squawk. Who are you and what have you done to Kaminari? Yow. That's ma fast, he yelled, struggling as Jiru tried to inspect him. Suddenly they heard the earth rumble below them, all of them staggering a bit. An earthquake, Peter asked aloud. It's Pixie Bob, Uraraka yelled. Okay everyone, I've done this exercise before, so here's the plan. She pointed into the forest. The lodge where the Pussycat Agency is located is straight through the forest. There's lots of those giant mud beasts Pixie Bob creates too, which would go without saying. How's she able to do that? Creating giant earth monsters that can act autonomously. That's some powerful quirk, Zero said. She has a powerful quirk, you said it yourself, moron. Bakugo grumbled, speaking up. Hey, round face, you know a way through here, or just go straight through the forest. Let's not cause a fire. This is a national park after all. Todoroki said, speaking up. Whatever, Uraraka, if you can take point and lead us, we'll do our best to barrel on through. Momo said, stepping up. I'll be up there with Uraraka. Peter stepped up. Midori, wanna come with? Sure, I'll join you. Ida declared with a raised hand. Sato, take the rear with Kirishima. Bakugo, Aoyama, watch our right flank. Momo said as she unbuttoned her shirt, exposing her sports bra and midriff as her stomach glowed and she pulled something out. Todoroki, Kaminari, take the left. Shoji, Jiru, Shiro, Koda, Takoyami, Ashido, and Asui, can you two run interference with me from the center? Ajiro, stay by my side. She readied herself, revealing her creation to be a rather intimidating grenade launcher. Right, everyone sans Bakugo and Todoroki replied. Peter could hear the rumbling, and from the trees far ahead, he made out the signs of the various dirt monsters trying to corral them. Guess I'll hear them, Hagakure said to herself within the center of the group. We better get to the lodge. Here they come, Kirishima said, hardening up as Peter saw the beasts charge forth with a roar. Peter saw Izuku glow with his quirk, and Ida got into a running position. I'm glad I'm not alone this time, Uraraka mumbled, before patting her cheeks, before putting on her game face. Okay you guys, follow me, plus Ultra. She jumped straight forwards, over the initial wave of monsters. Peter jumped between the trees, tumbling straight towards one monster. His leg came down like an axe head on one arm, and a green streak of lightning smashed through the other. The two landed on the ground and leapt, already moving on to the next monster before lasers, grenades, and acid spray ripped the disarmed beast apart behind them. Any dirt beast that tried to go around was either wrapped up in tape, smashed by a sugar-maddened Sato, frozen, melted, struck by a shadow monster, or blown to bits. Midoriya, catch, Peter shouted, aiming his hand. A line of webbing was thrown out, straight past Izuku. On instinct, the green-haired student grabbed hold. He held tight as Peter jumped past him and with a mighty heave, slingshotted him forwards. Green lightning crackled. SMASH. The attack took Izuku through several monsters only to stop on the side of a tree. He got his feet under him right before a bulldozer of ice buried a few more monsters, reshuffling the very earth as Todoroki gave them a wall to protect themselves. Only about 100 to go. Jiru groaned, her plugs down on the ground. Guessing here, maybe more. Like that matters, Bakugo grumbled, throwing a blast that brought a monster to its knees. We're going to smash through all of these moving statue rejects. Golems, Shoto corrected. Statues that come alive are called golems. Whatever. Oi, Dinaface. Bakugo rounded on Koda who flinched. Keep an eye out and support Tails. Make yourself useful. Alright. Koda ran over, moving to help carry the concussed Ajiro. We have to push through. Izuku grunted as another wave of the beasts came forth. Peter nodded. With that, all of Class 1 charged towards a forest of monsters. 4 hours later. Well, that was faster than I expected. Pixie Bob mused, standing in the clearing with her fellow heroes. Just past one, Aizawa stood behind the two women, hands in his pockets. The whole of Class 1 looked like they'd been run over by a dump truck. Twice. Hungry. Shiro groaned. Weishe. Kaminari swayed, face looking blank. Still an idiot then? Jiru muttered before letting out a small sigh of relief. Can I use the bathroom please? Aoyama groaned out, holding his midsection and looking blue. We usually clear that course in about 2 hours, Mandalay said with a smile. For you to take 4 is not bad at all I say. You said something about lunch. Momo groaned, her stomach grumbling as she had a hand over it. I gotta say, some of you guys did great in taking charge. Kitten, a panting Uraraka perked up. You'll be back to that lioness we molded before long. I thought I got the eye of the tiger then. Uraraka mused as she wiped her brow. Same thing. Pixie Bob laughed before turning towards some of the other students. Peter's eyes moved around, checking out the clearing. There was a lodge, making the entire thing look like some kind of mountain hotel with its wings, outside tables and such. There was even a lake close by, a range of plateaus and boulders all around. Alright, listen up. Aizawa stepped forward. Since you did better than expected, you'll be able to have lunch now and a 2-hour break period. It's past 1 right now. We'll have a light training preview of what's to come after 4 o'clock. Collect your luggage from the bus and go to your selected rooms. There are markers indicating where the boys and girls of your class will be sleeping for the duration of this camp. Use the 2 hours on your lunch, cleaning up, and getting yourself familiar with the agency. Feel free to explore to get a lay of the land. He pointed to the front door behind him. Follow that and you can either hit the showers first or go to the mess hall, I don't care which. Just be back out here at 4. Aizawa turned about. That'll be all. We also have a hot spring onsen too, Pixie Bob said. 1 for the boys and 1 for the girls of course. An onsen. Peter perked up. Momo walked up. Never heard of one, Peter-san? She asked. It's a communal bath of sorts, made from a mineral hot spring, no doubt. Yes, she's right, Koda stated before he sniffed the air. I can smell some sulfur in the air. Oh, hot springs. I have never been in one of those before, Peter said. Hey, Pixie Bob, the blonde woman turned his way. If I may ask, this agency looks a bit like a mountain resort. This land used to be a resort like that? Yeah, Uraraka explained as she stepped up, helping Izuku to his feet. The former resort fell into bankruptcy, so the wild pussycats were able to buy the land and then renovate it themselves. She smiled a little. Got a little history lesson when I came by here last. Got it all in one kitten, Pixie Bob exclaimed. Now, I'll go prepare you your lunch, so wash up, the blonde said. Bathroom at last. Aoyama bolted past, running into the lobby. So, she said that there's a hot spring, but I didn't bring my swimsuit. Darned, Peter mused as he and the rest of the class walked up to the bus to collect their luggage. Why would you use a bathing suit for an onsen? Todoroki asked as he walked up, eyebrow arched in amusement. Why would you not? Peter asked, head tilting. Peter, Karen whispered in his ear. Onsens are traditionally group hot tubs. Oh, Peter paled. What? Zero smirked. Is the almighty ace of class 1 afraid of going into a bath with us? Got something he don't want us to see? He leered playfully, lifting up a hand and waving his pinky. IGHN no. Peter gawked back, blushing deeply. I've never done that before, okay. I assume in America that you don't have hot springs to go to, Sato asked as they walked to the buses to collect their luggage. Not in New York. I've always stayed there my entire life, Peter replied as Izuku was able to finally muster enough strength to walk, which looked a bit like a waddle. Well, you can start today, Shoji said. We're all just guys in there after all. Should be fine. Indeed, Ida explained as he moved his hands around. In an onsen you usually come in wearing a towel around your waist. He then adjusted his glasses. Besides, it allows us to bond more closer as comrades and classmates. That explained things. Okay, then I might have to try it while I'm here, Peter said as he grabbed his suitcase and began to wheel it out. You could always come in later, the American boy perked up, turning to see the playful pink Mina grinning impishly. If you don't want to go in with the guys, you could always come in when the girls are in. How does that sound? Momo blinked, blushing a little as Jiru snickered and Asui stared blankly at him. No, Peter threw his hands up as he bent over to collect his other bags. I'm going to find a shower. Laughter erupted all around him as he puffed his cheeks out. After the shower, they made a very simple lunch of rice and various meats and spices. Wasn't bad, but Pixie Bob had told them that they would need to make their own meals starting tomorrow. They would cook them dinner too, but only tonight. All meals were left up to the discretion of both Class 1A and 1B from then onward. Speaking of, hey, check out Class B, Kirishima said as he helped Peter wash some of the dishes. The activity was something they would all have to do regardless of who cooked, and Peter, Kirishima, Shoji, and Asui volunteered to do so throughout the summer camp. Peter looked out the window of the kitchen, seeing 1B on a run of sorts with their teacher, Vlad King, leading the way, already in their UA. Gym uniforms no less. Guess their teacher's already getting a move on. Wonder what else they do that puts them on our level. Asui mused. Vlad sensei does look as serious as Aizawa sensei most of the time. True, but do you realistically think that anyone would be like Aizawa sensei? Shoji asked. He has a point. We got the 1 in a million guy, Peter muttered. But hey, he's made us into men. He hasn't led us astray from our goals to becoming heroes after all, Kirishima retorted. Peter was quiet as he wiped up the counters. Something on your mind, Parker-chan? Asui spoke up, and Peter turned, seeing the wide-eyed frog girl looking up at him. Kinda. Like what? Is island bothering you? No, Peter shrugged. I mean, why would it? Hehe, that's our ace, Kirishima exclaimed. Not even villains attacking a big event flusters him. I was flustered, no lie there, Peter replied. It helped that I had Todoroki, Midoriya, Hatsume and the others. And me, Karen whispered, but that went without saying. Well, I mean, I'm surprised you're doing okay and all, Asui said. Being up against armed and dangerous villains, with no chance of backup. I'm fine, Asui, really. Call me Tsu. Peter rubbed the back of his head. Tsu, sorry. But yeah, don't worry about it. I'm doing okay. Yeah, you got to tell us. Kirishima wrapped an arm around Peter's shoulders, making the taller brown-haired boy flinch a bit. You scrambled after the onsen talk. We missed you, dude. Hey guys. Uraraka poked her head in from the door. Wanna go explore around the agency? Pixie Bob is offering us a tour. After the tour and another hour to relax, it was time to reunite with Aizawa sensei for training. With their dirtied school uniforms put away in selected hampers, they were out in their UA. Gym uniforms. Izuku saw Aizawa standing before him, hands in his pockets as everyone filed out of the agency together. Peter was by his side, as was Uraraka, Todoroki, Yaoyorozu, and Ida. Kaken seemed to be on the other side of their group of fellow students. Ajiro was the only student not present. On time, good, Aizawa muttered. Now then, we will be conducting a taste of training today for what is to come tomorrow, and the rest of the week. Ajiro, as you know, is suffering from minor head trauma, so he will rest for the night, take some medication, and we will see how he is in the morning. Now, before we begin, I might as well explain the reasoning for this entire summer camp. Aizawa rolled his neck around to stretch. As you may have noticed, villains have begun to become more active as of late, whether they be domestic, and his eyes settled on Izuku, Shoto, Momo, and Peter, or abroad. Izuku rubbed his arm while Peter looked to the side. Yaoyorozu and Todoroki looked neutral. And it's up to you guys as the next generation to respond. So, we'll be countering by becoming stronger than the rest of your peers, both in UA and in other schools. He ran a hand through his hair. That is why I submitted your class to sign up for the upcoming Provisional Hero License exam in September of this year. A murmur of excitement passed through the class. Holy cow, a provisional license, Zero exclaimed. This early too. But we're still freshmen. Kota spoke up. That sounds awesome. Kirishima beamed before his face fell. What's a provisional license anyway? That is simple, Kirishima, Aoyama declared with a pose. It would allow us students to become provisional heroes whenever we are interns. Thus, we can perform heroics without fear of being labeled vigilantes. Aoyama has the right idea, Aizawa said, the blonde boy seeming to beam under the compliment. In either case, you guys will be able to contribute without getting into trouble. Normally, we don't do this until your second year at UA. But considering your progress, I decided to pick up the pace, not of you guys be held back just because you're first years. He then smirked a bit. What we will be doing today, from here until 8 p.m., will be a taste of what is to come all day tomorrow. Izuku gulped, knowing that was the same kind of devil's complexion he had back during the quirk apprehension tests. And we will be here to help, Pixie Bob explained from an incoming truck. Now then, Aizawa saw a truck pull forth, and it opened as two people jumped on out. Our additional helpers are here at last, chirped a feminine voice as a green-haired woman with wide eyes wearing a similar outfit as Pixie Bob and Mandalay approached, but with yellow as the dominant color. I'm Ragdoll. Sorry for the wait, but your gear and supplies for tonight's training is here at last. Indeed, came a booming and proud male voice, posing alongside her, and he was wearing a matching dress and outfit, but in brown. We will show you what we taught Uraraka many moons ago, and you will leave here with the eye of the tiger. Yaoe. Uraraka groaned miserably, offering a weak pump of her fist. Tiger, Ragdoll, thanks for coming. You'll help distribute the supplies and training tools? Aizawa asked. You can count on us, Eraser. Ragdoll beamed. With my search, I'll be able to keep track of all our little kittens here. The dress-wearing man known as Tiger seemed to flex, leering at the boys. And I'll whip them all into shape myself. Izuku's eyes scanned around. Huh, no sign of that kid. Must be playing games or something. Alright, Aizawa grinned, turning back to the students as Pixie Bob and Mandalay got to the back of the truck and began to unload various stuff. Now then, here is what he'll be doing. And Izuku felt his heart clench up. A smiling Aizawa is never a good time. Everyone had been split up across the clearing in front of the lodge, and some had even taken residence on the plateau overlooking the agency. Within 10 minutes, yells were in the air. Bakugo was firing off explosions after pushing his hands into steaming hot water. Zero seethed as he kept on firing his tape dispensers from his elbows. Kirishima fell down to the ledge of the cliff and smashed into the ground using his hardening in order to harden his body and increase his reaction time in said hardening. Meanwhile, in a nearby cave, Takoyami strained to maintain control of Dark Shadow while Tiger made Midoriya flex, stretch, and spar whenever he was close by. Momo stuffed her face full of brownies as she conjured various rubber balls from her free arm while her right one kept on picking up and munching. Beside her, Sato was eating a cake straight from his hand as the other was busy lifting up a 100-kilogram dumbbell. Up on the plateau ahead, Momo saw Peter in his training. There was a deep slope carved by Pixie Bob, and at the foot of it were dozens and dozens of boulders ranging from as big as a golf cart to as large and as wide as a house. And it seemed that he was pushing them up the hill to the top where Zero was screaming with Kaminari and his generator. Make something more complex, said a voice, and Momo looked up as she chewed, seeing Aizawa coming by her and Sato's table. She swiftly obeyed, the stream of rubber balls at her feet slowing to a trickle before stopping. The latest version of her favorite Matryoshka doll replaced them. Aizawa nodded lightly and moved on, surveying and going over each student as the sound of Bakugo's screaming was deafening. That hot spring at the end of this training was looking more and more inviting by the minute. HHH, Koji yelled, hands at his mouth as he screamed as hard as he could. That's it, young man. Let me see you roar like a lion, Tiger boasted, running beside him. The well-built boy turned, taking a deep breath. See this? He embraced him hard, and Koji let out a squawk as Tiger's muscles smothered his face, pointing out to a wide expanse of forest. Consider this your land. All that the sun touches is your kingdom. Now let it be known. Let the lesser beasts of the land know who is their king. Roar, my boy. Roar like the man you are, he yelled, standing beside him and yelling out with his own roar. R. Tiger bellowed out. How could a man in a dress be so forward and manly like that? Koji didn't get it at all. HHH. Koji yelled once more, before sputtering into a coughing fit. Keep at it. Don't give up. Be the lion, young man, Tiger encouraged. All right, keep up that balanced pony and keep on firing, Vlad yelled out as he walked across their own training range. Pony could feel the blood dribbling from her scalp as she kept on moving in a figure-8 motion around various wooden poles with bullseyes on them. Their class was doing some training already, as Vlad did not want Aizawa to overtake them. After their run, lunch, and tour of the agency, Vlad had set up the training course for all of Class 1B to utilize. The blonde could see the literal palace made of vines being made by Shizaki as the girl was busy focusing on creating and controlling her vines to make complex shapes and structures. Kendo was sparring with Shishida and Kamakiri, while that cheeky Monoma was running about touching and using whatever quirks he could get from all the students in the clearing. For her, keep on firing at the targets and keep on moving. Pony heard the sounds of explosions in the clearing beyond the other plateau, no doubt from Bakugo. She also saw a collection of boulders being made over and over at the top near the big electric light, and the spewing tape shooter kid, who was strong enough to be doing that. That Midoriya kid. Or Peter. Boo. Ek. Pony yelped, seeing Honuki poke his head out of the ground. Pony slipped off one of her horns and collided with the pole before landing on the ground. Sorry, training. Gotta spook you guys. Gonna go give Monoma a fright and let him touch me so. See ya, the lipless boy said before he took a breath and went back under the ground, giving a thumbs up as he dived like a swimmer. Dagnabit, Pony groaned out in English as she got back up, firing 2 horns as she shook her blonde hair. She got back on top, rising above the ground before she resumed her figure-8 flying motion around the poles, aiming for the targets as she fired 2 more horns at a time. 4 hours later. Good work, all of you, Aizawa said, hands in his pockets as it was now night out. Everyone in Class 1 looked ragged, sweaty in their UA gym uniforms as Peter wiped his brow. His arms and legs ached, his hands were calloused and he could feel blisters forming. I don't want to eat another brownie again, Momo groaned, wiping her mouth clean of chocolate. Boo. Sato groaned as his right and left arms twitched from the constant dumbbell lifting and eating. Zero let out croaks of agony as like Sato, his forearms were shaking as his elbow holes were pink and sore. Whatif. Kaminari let out, weakly thrusting out his hands with his thumbs up. Ida was sitting on a bench drenched in sweat, as was Izuku beside him. Ashido whimpered at her hands while Jiru nursed her earphone jacks in her fingers tenderly. Darkness envelops Takoyami, whose UA gym uniform shredded, uttered weakly. Uraraka and Aoyama were busy chugging water bottles offered to them by the pussycats, thanks to their quirks causing either nausea or bowel movement galore. They had to hydrate constantly over their training. That and use a designated place to puke, while Aoyama had the honor of using an outhouse. Peter did not envy him at all. Think this is bad. For 4 hours in a single go. Aizawa smirked and Peter took in a deep breath. Tomorrow, we get up at 5:30 in the morning and train until 11. So you're going to do this for 5 hours. And he held a hand out, finger upward. After lunch and a 2-hour break, we go back at this. For 6 hours until dinner. Groans came from the class, while Bakugo seemed to let out a more frustrated and pained growl. 5 and 6. Hiroshima, his UA gym uniform in tatters from his falling and creating craters over and over, asked in disbelief. With no breakfast in between either, Aizawa added, you'll be focusing on preparing your own cooking for lunch and dinner. The pussycats are feeding you today, but tomorrow you're on your own, in case some of you have forgotten. Right, Peter uttered, shaking his arms. No breakfast. Typical. Now then, dinner's being made as we speak, so I suggest you wash up and get some food in you. Aizawa pointed back to the lodge. Lights out at 10 sharp as well. You'll need as much sleep and recovery as you can get. Use the showers to wash up from this, and then get dinner. You can use the hot springs afterward to heal your body. and no one better be out of their rooms past 10 unless it's an emergency. Oh, and the cell phone tower close by has been attuned to only me, Vlad, and the Pussycat's phones. All of yours will have no service, so don't bother being on your phones late. Ashido let out a loud frustrated groan upward. Any questions, sensei? It was Todoroki, and Aizawa paused, turning. What about some of our UA uniforms? He turned, seeing the utter rags Takoyami, Kirishima, and most of the male students were in. We can't use these tomorrow, can we? We brought along spares that fit your dimensions. We have 10 per each student here, Aizawa responded. Any UA uniform that is too damaged we can toss. If it's too dirty, put it in the allotted containers in your rooms. We will bring them back to UA with us in our normal attire. Todoroki patted his drenched wife beater. Did you pack extra? Only a few. Then I suggest going at it shirtless tomorrow to save some. Aizawa closed his eyes. That'll be all then. And he walked back into the lodge. I'm getting in that hot spring, Ashido declared. My hands need to eat it. We could all use it, but we should shower first, Ida declared. And fast too. We wouldn't want to keep our hosts waiting. He got up and wobbled due to his legs being as sore as can be. Hungry too. All that falling's taken a lot out of me. Oh, Kirishima groaned. But it should make my hardening harder. I felt my reaction speed getting faster and faster. Isn't Class 1B still training? Jiru asked, and Peter perked up, hearing the sounds of yelling in the distance. Well, we did fight a bunch of dirt monsters first. Maybe we eat dinner first before they do, Izuku suggested. Dark reverie, Takoyami uttered. Stop saying creepy stuff, Hagakure spouted from the side. Peter felt a hand on his shoulder as he turned to see why. And we're getting you into the hot spring. It needed to heal your body, you know, Kirishima said proudly. I'm a fast healer. There's nothing wrong with bathing with your fellow students, Parker, Ida suggested. Buaha. Sato nodded dumbly. Yeah, come on, it will be fun, Izuku suggested with a light smile. Peter blanched, feeling all eyes on him. Bathing with a bunch of naked dudes didn't sound fun. Late that night, in a dark street in the Nantu ward of Tokyo, Sakai Gyozen walked with his boys into a nice alleyway of sorts. Further down the alleyway, beside some trash cans and under some fire escape stairs, the resident members of his gang were present. This all of M, a tall muscular fellow with the head and snout of a crocodile asked, wearing a wife beater. Some of his fellows wore masks and shades. He recognized him as Yuzui from uptown. Yeah, Gyozen nodded with his head. Me and my boys are here as promised. Nice. Apparently Ruzo-san texted us all to meet up here. What for? And to bring our quirk users too. Guess we're doing a hit, Gyozen asked. Got to keep a tab on those heroes though. Although if we're doing it at this hour we won't have to deal with night owls often. Yuzui showed off his maw of teeth in a grin. I've been meaning to sink my teeth into something. And my boys want some action. Do we know what we're even gonna do? The sunken-eyed corpse that was Osaka Shinra asked, the jittery man fiddling with his hands. Gyozen ran a hand through his slicked black hair. I know what you're going to do, ladies and gents, oiled a voice, and they all turned upward to the fire escape, seeing something sitting on the ledge. It was tossing an apple up and down, and Gyozen could make out what looked like a dark feather boa. Well, mostly gents, not that I mind, he drawled as he turned his head. Gyozen reached into his back for his gun, seeing scarlet red eyes leering down like a cat finding its prey. Arrogant fuck. His voice sounded like he sucked dicks too. Hey, who the fuck are you? Yuzui growled. The man turned before taking a bite of his apple as he reached into his pocket, tossing something down that the hulking lizard man caught. It was a phone. What the? This is Ruzo-san's phone. Thank all so much for bringing these lovely little tots to us, Red Eyes said as he took another bite of his apple. Your boss was a little more uncooperative, so we might have roughed him up just a little. You know, the tone of his voice made it clear he was smirking. Gyozen can see the white of his teeth. Like pull the arms off the gangster kind of rough. Should have seen the blood, it was like a Mexican pinata. Gyozen snarled and reached for his Glock before he whipped it out. You're fucking dead, he barked, and Red Eye's hand lashed out. Gyozen fired, his aim shifting as he pulled the trigger. Everyone else jumped at the sound. What the? He was aiming for him. How did he move his arm? He has a quirk. Everyone, Kai. Oh, Kirichi, Red Eyes drawled. We got some bodies for Shi-chan to rebuild his little army. On cue, down the alleyway, a black vortex seemed to come to life. To be a deer and make our little leader a happy boy. Two golden eyes emerged from the dark violet mass, even as he and fellow gangsters fired their guns into it. Gladly, and the great mist surged forth, Gyozen screaming as it washed over him. He fumbled in the darkness, firing his gun until it ran dry before the darkness left him as soon as it came. He landed on the ground, coughing as the man got up and looked around. "What the? Where am I?" Gyozan yelled, noticing that he was in a cell of some kind, seeing some kind of camera present as well. His eyes glowed, and Gyozan put his quirk, X-ray vision, to use. He could see him and his fellow gang members in other cells, trapped by walls several feet thick and composed of some sort of steel, with vents for air, and they all had cameras peering in too. No windows. Why would there be a cell with no door? And with a single fucking light built in too. Aha. More lovely quirks to sample. Came a smooth voice, so smooth and laced with poison that it made Gyozan's skin crawl. Tamura has found such helpful wicked friends. By the camera, a black ooze appeared beside it and Gyozan looked up into it, and caught a glimpse of a scarred and eyeless man, grinning like the devil before red-black tendrils lashed out, goring and pinning Gyozan to the wall as he howled in pain. With his X-ray vision, he could see it too. His comrades all being pinned to the walls or to the ground as he was, these things digging into him, piercing his flesh and into his bones. Gyozan screamed, writhing as the tendrils glowed. His vision became clouded, and the last thing he ever heard was the chuckling of the man behind the black ooze. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 19. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.